Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians. I'm your host Luke, and this week I had the pleasure of recording in Ben Edgar's studio, overlooking the lush green surroundings of Belgrave. Ben is an incredibly talented guitarist, producer and engineer, with a fascinating approach to music making, one that embraces challenges, limitations, and the unexpected creativity that they bring. We dive into his collection of guitars and related instruments, discuss how different tools shape his sound and push his playing in new directions. Naturally, we get into some serious sound nerd territory, talking pedals, recording techniques, and the nuance of capturing the right tone. Beyond gear talk, Ben shares stories from his experiences recording and touring the world with Gotye and Angus and Julia Stone, working with Dope Lemon, and engineering the latest record for the Cat Empire. This episode is full of great insights, music wisdom, and good vibes. I hope you enjoy.
Excellent.
How old is this gorgeous Gretsch next to me?
See, that's a question that gets... Is this how we're starting the podcast?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is that all right?
Dude, 100%.
I just saw it and I was like, wow, that looks beautiful.
It's gorgeous, for sure. I feel like that question gets asked a lot, and my answer is often disappointing because I think it's from 2000 no, I think I got it in 2008. Maybe it's 2003, something like that. So it's a reissue of a late 50s Gretsch 6120 that has been Brian Setz's main guitar. So this is a replica of that. It's like they took all of the things that existed, in his particular guitar. They like forensically, took it to pieces, and not literally, but I suppose digitally they can scan everything that's going on, and then included all of the mods that he's done. So he's got locking tuners on it and some custom wound Filtertron pickups. I feel like I could excite you more. I think in the other room there. Oh, where is it? I don't know. It's disappeared. But I do have one from 1963, which is really cool. It's quite similar to that. Same color. Nice orange. But it's interesting to have, well-made reissue versus vintage one. I got a few examples of that. And some of this happened a few years ago. Our family moved to Germany for a few years. We were intending it only to be 1 year. Just, because my wife's German, we thought, cool, let's have an experience there. At the time, our son was 3.5. And, kids are obviously much more movable when they're younger. And I think we were both craving something different, like let's live in Europe for a while and expose our son Liam to the culture over there. And I went over with a handful of instruments and some recording gear. Not much, but I thought this will be enough to do a certain amount of things. And then that year went by so quickly. We had an awesome time. And then we thought, cool, let's stick around for another year. And during that year, COVID booted up. So it became apparent, like, we're not going anywhere for a little while. And during that time, I started to be doing a lot more work and just gathering more stuff and really missing a lot of things which I didn't have with me back here. So I ended up buying stuff with the idea of like, well, I'll buy it here, use it here, and then sell it before we go back to Australia. But I ended up actually falling in love with a lot of it and then kind of forgetting, not forgetting what I owned, but forgetting the, maybe how much I liked what was here because, out of sight, out of mind, or out of ears, out of mind. And so when we ended up shipping a bunch of stuff back at the end, it was like, now we got not exactly duplicates, but, similar things. I did a similar thing. One of my favorite guitars is an Epiphone Casino. It's a hollow body, like real Beatlesy kind of thing. I've loved that for ages, and I didn't have that with me in Germany. So I ended up buying, someone in France was selling like a 1962 Gibson ES330, which is very similar to the Casino with the pickups, and it doesn't have it's very hollow. It doesn't have a center block in it. And I found one of those, kind of trying to chase this feeling that I was missing. And it's funny, man, like that's where I'm going with this. You're probably thinking, oh man, we're off to a bad start. He's crapping on infinitely already. But being able to compare the vintage stuff, which is generally more expensive, to, you know, a well-made modern reissue. I don't know if the internet, I reckon, yeah, I would say internet forums are almost entirely responsible for us having this perception that if something's older, it's going to be better. It's not just with instruments, like with studio gear as well. It's like, oh, you've got that old mic or those old pre's. And a lot of the time, yeah, it's absolutely, correct in that, you know, transformers and the way those older circuits might interact can just have a magic in it that's sometimes magic because we're familiar with it. Like we've heard that on a lot of older records that we really love, and we're trying to find, you know, what is that magic? It's often in that, like in the iron in the transformers, which can't necessarily be recreated these days, but it can also be the tiredness of the gear as well. If we're used to, you know, sharp transients and things being very open and very hi-fi in a digital world, if something's a little softer, for example, with guitar amps, sometimes guitar amps like, oh, that sounds way more mellow. It's like, well, that speaker is 50 years old and it's, you know, it's been getting punished for a long time. It's quite inefficient and therefore mellow, and that can be pleasing to the ear. You know what I mean? Same can happen with pickups. Like they can roll off some of their, not necessarily the headroom, but yeah, I think the feel of them can become a lot rounder and softer. Acoustic instruments, definitely the case. In fact, maybe that's a big exception because, yeah, it's not like all vintage acoustic instruments are superior, but yeah, there are just some that you realize when you play them, it's like, oh my God, okay, I understand. Like there's no new boutique manufacturer who can even get close to, you know, what decades of temperature shifts and just something being played, you know, music being played through an instrument will do to, you know, how it makes you feel when you're playing, which isn't always a byproduct of the sound either. Sometimes you're just in on something and it pushes out the music in a certain way. And I think when that happens, it's pretty gold. I mean, do you find there's parallels between what I'm saying and what you might have experienced with drums?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm enough of like a geared nerd.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I've got, like access to Tony Floyd's like incredible vintage drum collection.
Nice.
And it's amazing. And he gets so excited when he tells me about like a new Ludwig he's found from the 40s or something.
Nice.
And like I can hear it and it sounds beautiful, but I think, I don't know, I've never like collected old gear.
Yeah.
And I grew up playing this old like 60s Pearl kit of my uncle's, and it was just like breaking and falling apart. And like, so it had all this vibe and character, and it was like one of the few maple kits, whereas like most of them were fiberglass at the time. So it had all this like awesome sound and vibe, but I was also like facing the like, it's old and falling apart and I can't just replace it with like the vintage lugs because they don't make them anymore anywhere. And so I've got to put like a new piece on, and then is it like, now I'm messing with the like, it's not what it was originally.
Yeah.
All those sorts of things. And I think I've just become more of like a, just going to jump in and play.
Yes.
Because I think maybe like the drums, it's like not as obvious as like a guitar that like, I don't know, you can get like a cheap drum and make it sound like kind of okay. Whereas like a cheap guitar, I feel just like sounds gross. But you can be a bad player like me and still like strum a nice chord on like a, you know, a couple grand acoustic guitar and it sounds beautiful.
Yes.
It's like, oh wow, that's not me. That's the instrument.
Yeah.
But you hear a good drummer sit on like a student kit and they make it sound great.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow.
Shit. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it around to that, because I think that's part of what I was getting at as well, is that, yeah, our expectation or even like the price point for something, I wish it was as simple as the price of an instrument equals the quality of an instrument in terms of the tone and the playability. It would make it so simple. I feel like in the classical world, it is more like that. Like some of the instruments are just priced unbelievably high. But if you only had to get one, like let's say you're a violinist and it's like, okay, well, it's $200,000 for this violin, but it's like, yeah, if you're going to get it and you know that that's the one, it sounds unbelievable, you can make it yours, that's the one, it just becomes you, all the hours of performing and practicing on it. That to me seems like a pretty cool deal compared to just chasing shit constantly. And yeah, going back to, you know, I was holding like internet forums responsible for a lot of stuff. I think we can get so easily sucked into that shit. And there are obviously some older people who get on those forums who they do whinge a bit about the internet. It's like, well, these are really cool, but yeah, since people started speaking about them here, they've gone up like 5 times the price, and they're really hard to find. They're like, yeah, now that everyone's buying shit on reverb.com, then the prices that would have existed on eBay last year, it's now like double the price. And yeah,
it is weird how like the popularity of something makes it so expensive at times because of that. Like someone says, oh, I found this really cool trick where you can just do this with this cheaper microphone, or this, like, I remember reading one about guys that were converting like old like megaphone PA tube amplifiers into guitar amplifiers and running it through as this like really interesting sounding tube amp.
Nice.
But then these like, you know, couple $100 old PA systems started selling for like $1,000.
Yeah,
because again, it was on a forum and someone said, oh, I get this really cool sound from this thing. Yeah. And it got so popular that all of a sudden it became so expensive. And this like cheap idea of like, oh, you could use this to make some music with this sound.
Yeah, these are junk. Well, no one uses them
literally
anymore, yeah.
But because someone's spoken about it, now it's like, oh, well, now we've got to pay a lot of money to get that, even though it's like, it was just like a toy.
Wacky, huh?
Very.
Yeah, there's heaps of that sort of shit that, just happens. I'm sure it's the case in drum world. Like, I mean, if you look around here, there's a little Vibrachamp amp. It's blackface from like the mid '60s. Like that's kind of like a student amp. At the time when Leo Fender had designed them, it's like, it's a really small speaker. But over the years, people have learned that those dimensions actually record really well. Like on stage, it's pretty quiet, but it's a fairly desirable amp because of that, but it was never intended for that purpose, you know. Same with those Princetons there. It was always like, think of it as a practice amp, but you wouldn't necessarily gig on it. But there's just a great sound that, you know, like I touched on earlier, I think it's the familiarity is what can draw us to it as well. Like we've heard that sound, like if you plug into it, it's like, oh shit, that feels really good, because it's, you know, often what we're expecting to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was recently chatting with jazz guitarist James Sherlock.
Yeah, nice.
And he was telling me that like he just plays his guitar, like this Sadowski, and the neck of it is quite wide. So it's like hard to sort of for him to transition to other guitars.
Yeah, sure.
So he just has basically the one guitar he does everything with all the time.
Wow.
What's your relationship with gear like? Because as we've said, like you've got a bunch of different amps and all these different guitars, and what's it like for you? All
right, I would be the opposite, but as you might have detected from what we were talking about a few minutes ago, I was drawing that analogy between us and classical musicians. I kind of envy that position that James is at, because you know, that gear acquisition bug that can flare up in us sometimes. It just wouldn't be there. Like if you've found your vibe and you're cooking on it, it's like great. I'm kind of the opposite. I have quite a lot of stuff. You can see it. You know, I've got some bunch of things lying around here, like some basses, and there's a baritone guitar, an old Silvertone, Strat, nylon string, and then in the other room, some hollow bodies, some acoustics. And then, you know, like mandolin, banjo, there's an auto harp over there, there's pedal steel over here, like lap steel down there. So there's a lot of stuff that's, incidentally, I guess, you know, I don't know if you'd preface the podcast with this, but we're, I'm not at Luke's place. I guess most people are. So Luke's kindly come over to my studio in Belgrave. So we're just sitting here amongst the instruments. So I enjoy this. Like when I say I'm envious of people with one instrument, it's on some levels, but I also do really enjoy assuming the role or accepting the task of, you know, painting a broad range of colors, more so for recording than live. But just having a lot of shit at your disposal means that you can, you know, cover a broad range, both sonically and texturally, and in terms of the feeling for whatever a song might require. And it's not like everything that I'd be called in to, you know, record on is going to need massive breadth, like a really wide sonic palette. But it's great to have these things, also because they'll change the way you play. Like, you know, if I was to pick up a Telecaster and if I was hunting for a part, it would be really different to if, say, I picked up that Gibson ES-125, which has flat wounds on it and a really big neck, and it's quite thunky. Like, they'll completely change the way you play. So I find that that's useful. It's almost like it's kind of the closest that one person can get to sounding like different players, I think, is having instruments that force you to play a different way. Especially if the instrument's hard to play. I actually enjoy that. I reckon I discovered that about 10 years ago. Like if instruments are set up with, heavier strings, higher action, not slick and slinky at all, then you really have to be deliberate in what you're going for. And I think that's great. I'm sure this doesn't apply just for guitarists, but the tendency or the likelihood to lean on licks when something's smooth, like you're just sort of like flapping through, I feel like that can become much greater if an instrument is very comfortable and very slick feeling. And I think, I've noticed whenever I've taken guitars into various luthiers over the years to get set up, they assume that you're going to want the same setup that 99% of their clients want. And that's just like make it as low as you can and make it play as fast as you can, Slick, like real straight neck. But I often have to be very clear. I mean, I've got a couple of guys I use now and they know when I come in, it's like, okay, set up the electric so it feels like an acoustic basically. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Which is good, man. I find that that's a real good help. There's no shit coming out accidentally. You got to be really deliberate about what goes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to early on. I was trying to remember which of my teachers it was, but they got me to like tighten up the kick drum pedal.
Yeah.
Like this, you get the string and there's like a little screw on the bottom, and you just like crank it as much as possible.
Yeah.
So the strings like stretched as wide as it can be, and so it's really sensitive and can be kind of hard. And
you mean hard as in hard to articulate it the way you want, or
because it's like you're cranking up the sensitivity because it's like so like it's harder to push down on.
Yeah, okay.
But then also it's like kind of more sensitive because it's like constantly under tension.
Yeah, sure.
But it was like if you can play this, then you'll be able to play any of the random like kick pedals that you sit at a gig.
Awesome.
And I was like, I wonder, like, maybe that's, like, as close as I could get to the drum equivalent of, like, the actions, like, in a weird position on the guitar.
No doubt, man. Yeah,
do you think that, like, it also is, like, I don't know, inspiring you musically because you're, like, playing with the limitations of the instrument or the, like, difficulties and challenges? They, like you say, sort of, like, get you out of thinking about shapes but more deliberate about what you're trying to play. Does it also, like, I don't know, inspire you from that instrument that you're using?
Yes, definitely. That's I think the desired outcome through that process is to end up exactly where you said, just being inspired by where it's at, like not being pushed into something that you can like lean on, like a crutch, something you're familiar with. It's like you're gonna have to work this a bit, Yeah. I remember hearing a really cool quote from The Edge from U2 saying, that every time he approaches coming up with a guitar part, he tries to, approach it as if it's his first time playing guitar. And I reckon that's unreal.
Wow.
I know there's a lot of Zen thinking that kind of goes with that as well. It's like you're always the student, you're always a beginner, you're always like you should be completely open at the start of something, which I think it can be really tough to do for anyone in any field, but especially, if you feel like something needs to be done quickly or, there might be aspects of what we do where, I hate to use the term job or work in relation to music making, but, sometimes I guess it can be like that because you look at, there's a certain quantity of things that need to be done within a certain time frame. So to get that done, you kind of do have to go with what is going to work. So finding that balance, like, there's not always scope to like really go for it. I mean, that's something I love. Like the majority of the recording work that I do for people, I'm on my own, working remotely here, which I love because it gives me a chance to really sound shit for a while I'm looking for something, I think that's critical. Last week some people came over, they wanted me to play on a session. I was like, I can do it remotely, but they really wanted to come. And it was great. We had a great time and I really appreciated their input. But I just noticed that I felt almost apologetic at times when going for things. And also I do find it tricky when you're like self-producing your own parts. Like there might be a vision for what you think you can offer to a song. Like let's say, like in most cases when I receive something, there'll be usually a vocal of some sort, probably a guide vocal by the time something gets to me, but bass and drums have often been done, and maybe there's a guide guitar part that's either going to be, replaced later by, let's say, the singer-songwriter who tracked it, or they want me to do a version of it. There might be some key stuff. Sometimes it's just drum and bass. Sometimes it's even just like some loops and a simple keyboard part. It's like, all right, we want to hear what your guitar stuff does before it all builds up. So, yeah. Where am I getting at? Sorry, man. I think like this tree is branching off a million times.
No, it's fine. You're talking about like that you enjoy recording solos so that you can make mistakes and sound
that's
bad
right.
whilst you're like exploring.
Yes, yeah. So when those parts come in, sometimes if I listen to the track, I usually find on the first listen, it's somehow like before you start getting too cerebrally involved with the form of the track or what you think you're going to do, or you start like looking at the computer screen and clicking around in plugins and shit. I find on that first listen, it's really good. I make notes of all the possible parts I think could exist in that in the song. You know what I mean? And I try and make a list of about 8 or so.
Could you describe what like things you might write down?
Yeah. All right. So I'll be listening to it, and there might be like something, the piano, let's say there's a little interlude between the verses and the choruses. It's doing this thing, and it's like, all right, cool. I could double that on a 12-string electric. So I'll just write 12-string double piano hook, and then the bridge, it might just modulate to a different section, and I feel like maybe that could open up. So it's like, lap steel, ambient for there. And I always try and just write wild card. So when I've done all the shit that I think should go, so there might be like, say, doubled acoustics. That's a pretty standard thing. People sometimes give notes as well for what they want, but I think, anyone who's sending stuff to someone else to do remotely, it's usually wise to also say, here's the direction, maybe here are some references, but do your own thing. I think that's important. Mm-hmm. That's something T-Bone Burnett has always said, like if you're guiding musicians a lot on a session, you've got the wrong ones. It's just, cool.
Wow.
But and so with the wild card, usually after all the bits that I think are going to work are done, as in tracked.
Oh, so you'll record all of the different possibilities?
Yeah,
as the next
exactly.
step?
Yeah, and right. I'll see. And I usually actually start with acoustics because generally their involvement in the song, if it's either strumming or finger picking, does create sort of a sonic bed within a track. And I find by putting those in first, there's less likelihood of the electrics being too busy. So by having that list I mentioned, it's if you know what's coming up, like for example, if I know that there's going to be lap steel like doing something in the bridges, or there's going to be 12-string in those interludes, and maybe there's going to be like something that I'll reverse, like play a chord pattern and then reverse each bar of it so it's got an interesting texture. It's like if you can start to see the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle before you're starting each part, then you kind of know what not to touch as well. Mm-hmm. Like maybe I'd intend to do something on the baritone, like a twangy thing at one point. It's like, all right, cool, well I'll leave the bottom part of this other electric part, I'll just play higher chord voicing so that there's definitely space downstairs for that. You know what I mean? Because that can become really tough to fit stuff in. Like you can have a lot of good parts, but if they're clanging into each other, not just in terms of playing at the same time, but occupying the same frequency ranges, then that can get tricky for whoever has to mix it, and it can just be tricky. Always listening for the vocal too, like just get the hell out of the way of that. Try not to eclipse it because that's a big danger zone on guitar. We coexist in a lot of the same frequency kind of ranges, and it's very easy to get in the way, which almost always means your parts are going to be turned down by whoever's mixing it. So I think that's an art form that I'm constantly chasing, trying to be aware of. I mean, some people are a genius at it, and you hear some players, like when they are on record, they just always tend to come through in a really kind of present way, and I think it's because of the way they play, the way they are sensitive to the song. The best example I can think of, actually, in terms of drums, or out of anyone I could think of, any instrument, is Steve Jordan. Every time that dude's on a record, and it's not necessarily one that he's produced, but notice how big he sounds, like particularly his snare. It commands so much space in the mix. And I think that's because of his groove and his tone. It's like, cool. Well, there's so much command there, and it's this beautiful open. He always has a woody quality, regardless stylistically what he's doing. Everything just sounds so woody. It's like you'd be mad not to put that like center stage in your mix because it supports everything. It's like this big tree in the middle that everything can just branch off. You know what I mean?
That's a beautiful way of like putting it.
Yeah. Would you agree though? Like, yeah,
absolutely.
Every time I've heard something with him on it, it's like, It's also possible that he's a hard ass in the session. He's like, all right, motherfucker, you turn this down, I ain't coming back.
Yeah.
You never know.
It's contractually obliged to
stay exactly.
at the...
Snare drum louder than vocal. All right, I'll do the session. Hey, you want some more tea? I'm going to...
Oh, yes, please.
All right.
It's delicious.
Great.
It
sounds like it's like word for us from our sponsors. Like it's usually this time in a podcast. It's like, have you ever tried peppermint tea fresh from the garden?
We've got some like old person who used to live in our, as in like before we moved in. I don't know about their age.
Yeah.
Planted some mint somewhere, and so it's somehow got underneath the concrete in our like courtyard.
Yeah.
And so now we just get mint that's like forcing its way through the concrete.
The best.
And since I can't remember who introduced me to fresh mint in the tea, but it's excellent. So
good, huh?
A lovely word from the both of us. For
Thank you, nature.
Yeah.
It's the same here. Yeah, mint just grows wild, so just pick it.
Can I ask about the interesting guitar sounds that you make?
Yeah.
Like separate to, all the other amazing guitar work that you do, you have like, I don't know, a really interesting like discography of appearances of like creating sound.
All right. Well, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. I feel there are a few factors that have led to that being an interest of mine. I think one is, throughout my career, both in recording and live situations, I've often played with artists who are guitarists, which has meant like, all right, cool, something's already being said. And often it's something really strong. If it's a singer-songwriter who's worked out, composed a song on guitar, and often they're self-taught too, to a pretty large degree, singer-songwriters. Not always, but yeah, often when it comes to guitar, people who sing and write, generally like there's some piano going on and there's some guitar going on. Yeah, and they'll often have a feel that, if I've ever been asked like, hey man, can you, I did this demo part, it doesn't sound all that good, I just recorded it quickly, can you redo it? Often like, I try and steer clear of that, because if I try, I just actually can't get the same vibe that they have. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
It might sound maybe a bit too accurate if I'm doing it, even if I'm not trying to sound accurate. It can also be my instruments too. Like sometimes something might almost be too well set up to get across a certain emotion that might have existed. Mm-hmm. Part of this might also reflect aspects of what we know as demoitis, where something might have been done just quickly without much thought in terms of how it was played, the tuning of an instrument, how it was mic'd up, where it was recorded. But sometimes there's just a quality that's inimitable in there. You try and get it back at a later stage, and people have experienced this. Yeah, I'm sure ever since the history of, since recording has begun. But yeah, it's a thing, like just trying to chase something that has a natural, free kind of quality to it. And again, this might be stylistically specific too. There'd be certain things, like I guess if we were doing a Steely Dan record, then everything I'm talking about might not be applicable. They'd probably want to do about 30 takes and then chop up everything. But anyway, yeah, I'm not. So again, just to get back to the nucleus of your question. So yeah, often I would be in situations where guitars already exist in their more predictable, typical format. And for example, all the stuff I've done with Angus and Julia, they both play guitar and they both have really beautiful, unique voices, and the way they come up with parts and the way they interact together. And so, yeah, the challenge for me in those sort of instances is I receive a track to play on, or it might be live, we might be in a rehearsal somewhere. It's like, hey, there's this new thing, let's work it out. And it's kind of daunting because you hear it, it's like, fuck, it actually sounds complete as it is. It's like, how do I fit into this? So that, for example, just to go deeper into the question, is why I own quite a few instruments that aren't guitars, just to try and, exist within a different tuning or maybe a different frequency range. Like the lap steel has gotten me out of trouble a lot in that regard, because you can really, just have different shapes, different voicings that aren't going to, build up or mask or get masked by what's happening on a guitar. And also, texturally, there's a lot that can be done there, and the pedal steel. And again, it's stylistically dependent, but banjo and mandolin can have a really good purpose there. And, trying to find ways for those to not be in their traditional context as well can be good, And again, that can be a tricky thing if I'm doing a session when other people are there. Like if you bring out something that someone might associate with maybe something they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
It might be like, oh, hey, how about I try and just tune this mandolin in an open tuning and catch those lines that are happening there. It's like, nah, this isn't a folk track. We don't want mandolin. It's like, hang on, let's just try. And another factor on this, and if you're concerned I'm getting off point, don't worry, man, I'm still there.
No,
okay,
not
cool.
at all. Yeah.
I think another factor in that is messing with the sound a lot, like either with pedal boards or in the box. Whilst recording, just trying to find something that doesn't get in the way of other instruments and that can maybe, make a strong statement or have a strong sentiment, its own sort of character without necessarily having to cruise through as a standard thing that you have heard before. And something that for me, hang on, sorry, saw my screensaver come on and was concerned that it might eclipse the audio, but so I do have, like you can see up there, it's my main pedal board. It has various things on there. I lean pretty heavily on reverbs and delays for a lot of things. When it's called for, obviously, there'll be times where it's like, no. But I actually, that's become maybe like a bit of a crutch for me. Like one big change I made when we did move to Germany, I had my pedal board with me with stuff on it that I'd been using for quite a while and getting used to certain sounds. That I had these two Strymon pedals that at the time everyone had. It's the Big Sky and the Timeline, and I decided to sell them both because it's like, oh, cool, now I've got time to like do some practice and like start looking for things, actually sound like shit for a while, like uneasy, like chuck out the crutches. And it was good, man. Like it was really helpful for me to start to develop ways to get a different sound without leaning on those things. Because prior to that, it had been a pretty busy time, and I was just kind of sick of sounding the same in a way. Or I became really familiar with the bag of things I had that I knew would work. So it's like, all right, let's try and make a different bag, or at least extend this bag. And I've ended up, repurchasing other things that actually do similar stuff to what those pedals did, but a bit different. So I find like really colorful. I'm not necessarily into like a delay, like set up the tap tempo and have like clean delays like Steve Lukather style or something. It's not that. It's just what sort of color can you get out of them? And there's so many great pedals and plugins these days that give you a lot of color, like warbly modulation or things that might reverse or reverbs that might not do what you would expect them to do. I find, I capitalize those things on a lot to create strengths in what I might offer to a recording. But again, not always. It's not like everything's always wet, but often when recording acoustic instruments as well, sometimes coloring them really heavily with certain effects. Like maybe there's a really short lo-fi delay with the repeats up quite high. It might give something a really like tubby, it might sound like something old that's like in a can or something, just kind of like echoing around. Those sort of things can really support and take a song outside of just like, okay, here are the standard instruments. Which in turn, I think that's a lot of fun that we can have these days recording remotely now that it's such a common thing. I think that's something that COVID really helped, actually. People becoming comfortable with the idea of like, hey, I'll send you the parts. And I'm not saying for me specifically, but just globally, like that's more of a thing, right? And I think it's good, like particularly in the earlier stages when you're working on stuff, often things sound can sound quite sterile until further down the track where it's like, all right, now let's send this to someone to mix. Or, you know, I like trying to throw as much color into my stuff as possible. And and it's generally received on the other end like that too. Like I'm printing almost all of the color. It's like, you know, there was a time, again, I think this is dying off too, but people used to have the idea that's like, well, if something's being recorded elsewhere, then we need to receive it like as clean as possible, like completely unaffected, no EQs, no compression, just tracked super clean. But I found that doesn't work all that well, because sometimes your parts will be then presented by someone else with their idea of how it should sound. And often, there have been instances where I've heard that and been like, that wasn't my intention for the part at all, and now it's, you know, kind of sounds shit. Again, this is like saying that my opinion of that is better than someone else's, but I think when you are the one coming up with the part, it's important to like package it completely and say, here it is, this is the color I want.
Yeah.
You know, even if something's going to be like turbo compressed for an effect, you know, like that with acoustic instruments particularly, or like something might be really heavily distorted, and it's like, cool, well, that's the part. Without all that shit, then the part is kind of useless, you know, and maybe it'll even get muted on the other end. I mean, it might anyway, but yeah. That was a long answer to your question, but do you feel like that covered some of what you're after? Yeah.
Can I follow up a little bit?
Please.
Like, you know how when, say, you're learning an instrument and a teacher might encourage you to, like, sing the part, like, as you play it, to, you know, try and not just, like, play the pattern or something. What's your attitude when you're, like, using all these pedals? Can you hear in your mind the note that's going to come out because you know the reverb and the delay so well?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's, again, that's almost like an extension of what I was saying earlier about instruments, you know, having their own idiosyncratic variants that they'll inform the way you play, you know. If something, is actually quite tough to play, or maybe the action's really high as you get up, or maybe the intonation goes a bit crappy around the middle of the instrument, that'll influence where you're going to sit. Also, which, you know, the way, whatever pickup you're using, how that might speak with whatever you got going. Similarly with effects, it becomes like a world, like a whole flavor that it's going to influence what you play. And generally, like, once you get a feeling for what it is, like, then, like, you're in it. If that answers your question, like, you do kind of know what's coming out, but it's not always super predictable. But and I think the fact that it's not super predictable is also what's fun about it too, because you're in there, you don't know exactly. Sometimes you have to be really careful dynamically when you got certain things going on. It's like, okay, if I dig this in too much, sounds like shit. There's a certain sweet spot here because I've got all these things running. Something I do like to use a lot is the Electro-Harmonix POG, the poly-octave generator, which, it does stuff like filters. You can add octaves above and below, and just filter out frequencies and have the attack running kind of slow, and it has this sort of detune effect. I find that can be really useful, and that's one of those ones that, dynamically, once as you're setting it, you have to really find a sweet spot. Like if you got it set and then you dig in harder than where you were setting, it's like, ooh, no, that's not what I want, or you know what I mean? So I find those things just become awesome extensions to, you know, push you somewhere. Where you might not necessarily always expect to be beforehand, but when you're in it, I think that's actually a great feeling when you got something you feel like is contributing. And some of those sort of parts too, like if you're getting really poggy and verby and delay, they're not always recognizable as guitar parts either in the end, but it just might be something that supports a space in the mix or sits behind something or at the end of the track. Like you haven't really noticed something until everything else stops and you hear something trailing off. You're like, okay, so that has been under there, like offering a sort of like bubbling away. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's so interesting. And I really like that, you've got this like constant attitude of like, I want to like be engaging completely with the part that you're playing, and the interest for you that comes from like not quite knowing how that like sound's going to come together, but that's exciting, or the guitar's different and it's forcing you to move your hands a bit differently, and you're constantly pushing yourself. That like open-minded like student type thing you were talking about, like it's so evident that that's like in everything that you do.
Oh, cool. Dude, I'm stoked that you feel that way. That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, one thing that, I think I try not to do is to sound generic. And sometimes it's hard, but I think, with all our instruments that we play, it can be easy to slip into things that we know are going to work because we've heard them work a million times before. But I think guitar is a particularly dangerous one with that, especially when it comes to licks or just certain things that might happen in between here and there, like the way people might use their whammy bars on certain things or certain use of effects. Like, I've become somewhat allergic to that shit over the years, but then again, I can't promise that those artifacts don't exist still in my playing. But I try and for example, every once in a while, someone might ask me to play on something, or to come in on a session, and I'll hear the track, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm the right guy for this. Or like, I know what they want, and I know what they're asking for, and but it might be the opposite of where I'm trying to go, and it's sometimes it's a little hard. Mate, I don't know if it's an ego thing or what, but it's like, fuck, do I really want to sound like that? Yeah, it's almost like a bit of shame. Like, all right, let's do it. I'll put these pedals on. Okay, you want me to do that? Okay. But I'm actually not really good at sounding like that anymore. I think I used to be. Like, I went down that path for a while, like transcribing lots of stuff that might have had that sound. But I just grew less and less fond of that. But it is pretty hard to edit stuff out of your playing, I think. I don't know if you've ever found this. Like, you might learn either it's a technique or a certain approach to sound, and it can become like really deeply built in. I think for me, a big thing has been my approach to vibrato on guitar. Like, when I was younger, if I was like transcribing a Steve Vai track or something like that, or Joe Satriani or something, like you just get used to, this feel like they have light strings and a super slinky neck. And there's a certain way that the sound can come out, and just subtle little things in the way maybe you splay chords, or the way your vibrato happens, or the way you articulate stuff in lines that can, even if you don't think you've got any of those artifacts there, like, to some people's ears, they're like, what the fuck? I've been schooled pretty hard by some people who have had like really critical discernment over that sort of stuff, and it's awesome. It's like, oh, what do you mean? It's like, come on, dude, like that vibrato. Actually, my wife's hectic on it, she's a cellist, and her, just her, I guess her understanding like of vibrato and the subtleties in it is crazy. And often, she's hassled the shit out of me on certain things. So what's it go with that vibrato? It sounds fucked, It's cool, thanks.
I guess it's something that she's clearly got the expertise on, because it's so integral to that part of the instrument, whereas it's maybe a smaller part of so many other things you've got going on.
Exactly, and if it becomes unconscious, then it can be a bit of a danger zone, just wiggling away some cheesy sounding like 90s vibrato. So trying to edit shit out, I feel, is hard. And sometimes there's that thing of like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, where you try and get rid of, or actively discard things that you perhaps don't like anymore, that may have been part of your playing at one point, but then maybe too much can get chucked out. I think I've been through that myself, of just trying to play too simply at times. But then again, simple is often the winner. But sometimes, I don't know, like going back to what I was saying earlier about the having a list of things to play on a recording and doing a wild card every time. It's kind of fun, because you get through all these parts, and as you do more and more takes, I guess you get it can become a little more, not necessarily intellectual, but I reckon the creative boundaries tighten up a bit, because you're getting, also, you're laying more groundwork. It's like, cool, all right, I've already recorded 5 parts. I did have it written down that I was going to try that other one. Nah, don't need to do that anymore. I mean, sometimes I'll have an idea for a guitar part, and I'll be trying it on tons of instruments. I just can't get it working, and I'll just end up finding it on a keyboard part somewhere, It's like, all right, that wasn't working. What can I do? What do I look for? And, maybe open up some Mellotron samples and find something there. It's like, all right, that's way cooler. I'll send that part through. But when the wild card comes, I reckon this is worth talking about for a second, because at that point it's like, well, cool, I'm happy with how the track's sounding. I feel like, I'm ready to submit what's there. All right, wild card, what am I going to do? And it's it's kind of licensed to just be a dickhead, and it's knowing that knowing that the recipient is going to receive it as a wild card. It's like, I got nothing to lose. And dude, 9 times out of 10, the wild card parts become prominent in what I said. No shit.
Wow.
So it's like, wow, man, what was that thing? That sounded really weird. Yeah, usually it's just being stupid with something, like with a tuning that I've never used, running it through some things I wouldn't have thought to, or something that's like maybe quite abrasive in an otherwise gentle track, or maybe the other way around. Maybe there's something that's really punchy, and then there's something that's just like cavernous. Yeah.
Why do you think it is that they like people seem to love these wild ideas that you put in?
I think it's because we often get, when we're creating music, particularly because we are using computers these days a lot, just staring at this rectangular screen, everything becomes, even if it sonically doesn't sound like cookie cutter, I think our process often is. And in order to be surprised, or should I say the likelihood of surprise is pretty minimal. You know what I mean? Especially when we're working with like a lot of software instruments and software plugins, and, in order to get a session going and to get stuff happening, we do stuff that's within our control. It's like, all right, I'm going to put this up. I know what these plugins do. Yep, that's going to work. That's a good verb. I'll use that here. Yep, cool. I'm going to EQ it with this because I know it well. But I think sonically shit like that can happen as well. But, if a surprise comes in, it's like, it's like, it's exciting. It's like fresh meat, It's like, what have we here? Yeah, that's my take on it. There could be other reasons, but yeah, it might not be the case for everyone, but yeah, I must say, I think anyone looking for more generic, like straight ahead stuff probably knows not to ask me, because they might be disappointed. But so maybe I just am fortunate enough to be working with people who are open enough to get something that's a bit wacky and be like, hey, thanks. Just what the doctor ordered. Even if it's maybe just once or twice, because don't want to overcook the goose.
You mentioned you work with Angus and Julia Stone.
Yeah.
That's been like a pretty long-standing relationship now.
Yeah, it's been 10 years I've been playing with them, yeah.
What's that journey been like, as the sort of albums that have come out in that period have had like a few different vibes from, the Rick Rubin thing to, some of the more like home-released stuff, and a few different characters on like the 3-4 albums that have come out. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I really respect that they've evolved the way they have. Like, they're super cool in that regard. I know for a lot of artists of that pedigree, kind of sticking with the sound, like it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, sort of thing. But like the first record of those that I played on was the Rick Rubin one. I didn't do it they were mostly at his studio, Shangri-La in Malibu. I hope that's still there, man. I know those bushfires were ravaging Malibu last week. A lot of shit burnt, but yeah, I really hope it's there. I know Bob Clearmountain's studio mixed this, got totally toasted after decades of being there, and Greg Wells' place. Anyway, I didn't have the fortune of going there. I was doing my parts here remotely. This studio was pretty new at the time, and Ryan Hewitt, who was the engineer, he's in Nashville now. That guy's a tremendous force of tracking, mixing, musical goodness. He'd be sending parts over for songs. Like, they were pretty close getting towards the end of it, I think, and just realizing like, oh, okay, we need some extra colors. At the time, I had gotten to know Julia just kind of briefly through working with her on some shows within Australia for an album that she'd released called By the Horns. So we'd done some live stuff, and like really connected musically and personally. Like, she's an absolute legend. I really love and respect the way she makes music. It's very free and open, and she lets everyone be themselves. It's great. So I was stoked to be asked in on that. And then, not long after that, or actually maybe it was about 6 months after the tracking, their manager asked if I'd like to tour with them. I was like, yeah, for sure. So that started off, the band rehearsals were in LA, actually, in Santa Monica. We spent like a week or two just trying to find a vibe, which, like I said earlier, they both play fantastic guitar parts. For all the stuff I'd done on that record, it was clear what to do, but how to approach some of their older stuff was, that took a bit of like feeling around, But again, like I said, I really appreciate that, Julia just allows everyone to be themselves. And, Angus has a really strong kind of production sense about everything he does. He does like refining things, getting quite particular on details. But I really enjoy going on that process with him too, because, it's not for nothing. He, he really feels idiosyncratic details in a sound or a part, like very particularly. And if there's been something on a record that he wants to kind of support his vocal a certain way, then it kind of needs to be verbatim.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, in a lot of instances. And that's cool. So there's quite a lot of contrast in the way those two interact. But and then, I don't know, we're on the road for probably a year and a half on and off for that album cycle. And then we did the Snow record, which we recorded on Angus's farm. It was me and Danny Ferrugia and Julia and Angus, and Adam Rhodes was engineering. It was in this sort of shack on a farm out behind Byron. It was pretty lo-fi. There was, a generator bubbling away. If someone put on the kettle, like all the power would go down. It's that sort of vibe.
Okay, cool.
We had a great time just jamming for, I don't know, like a week. And that was a really cool energy. And like I was saying earlier about that, that demo-itis thing of sometimes that earlier shit having a certain quality. I think it was very deliberate of them to capture that, because that record is mostly that. Obviously, there was some overdubs that happened later. But the foundations of that album just happened then,
Wow.
Yeah. And it was cool. Like, it doesn't matter if there's some cicadas or like, what are those birds? They call them bin chickens up there. There's some like
the ibis?
Yeah. That's like, they'll be hanging around. There's kookaburras and shit, and like squeaky floorboards and leakage. And my amp was in the back of a Toyota Hi-Ace that was like parked out the front of the, like, that was the isolation cab.
Okay.
We had all these cables running out, and it was kind of like, well, it was very loose in terms of what people would expect to be like a pristine recording environment, but it was also perfect because of that,
That album's got such a great vibe.
It does,
It's really
doesn't it?
interesting hearing about, how it was done.
Yeah. And then the albums that followed that, I guess there's been a couple. Life is Strange, that happened during the pandemic, so I was in Germany, being asked to send parts through remotely, and that was awesome. I was really happy to have, time to sink into that stuff. Those songs have a really beautiful kind of quality to them, I feel. And then, Cape Forestier is the most recent one. And the majority of the tracking for that happened either just at the end of when I was in Germany or when I'd come back here. Again, they'd send through stuff at various stages of completion and be like, all right, can you add some things onto this? Sometimes it was even the case of like, oh, here's a demo from like 12 years ago that we did. Can you like turn this into something else? And then we'll sing on it. So
wow,
that sort of stuff's really fun to have that much license and trust. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to keep everything. I think that's what is a cool understanding about leaving something in someone's hands. It's not like everything that I've submitted to them, they've been like, that's awesome. Sometimes like, that's kind of cool, but now that we're hearing it like that, it needs to be at a higher tempo. Can you do it at 108 instead of like 102? And so that's usually a matter of like retracking everything, which can feel like a real burden at the time. Like, I put so much into that. But in that process, it's you often just find other stuff as well. It's like, well, okay, this feels differently at this tempo now. So this finger picking pattern maybe can change into this, and cool. Now this other idea can happen. All right, I'll scrap that. So again, man, a really long answer to your question, but that in terms of the album cycles, that's where it's ended up till now. The most recent tour was last year, 2024, doing the Cape Forestier, I guess, world tour they'd call it. Australia, New Zealand, Europe, USA, and a little bit of South America, which was first time for me down there. It was epic. It was brief, but
what's the like, I don't know, best bit for you about like, or basically being in the band? I can answer that. The best thing about being in that band is that I can be myself.
So that's a big one. Not just, I mean, yes, because I'm often playing parts that I've put on their records. Sometimes it's hard to recreate those sounds live because the sounds haven't always just come through, one of my amps and a pedal board. Like often there's other shit going on as well that I'll be doing in the box. So yeah, that's a big challenge. But being given the space and the freedom to do that, and like having a niche to sit in there is really cool. Mm-hmm. And I value that a lot. I think ideally, any sort of musical situation becomes its best when that's present. To bring it back to drummers for a second, I've always thought someone like Steve Gadd to be a key example of that, because if someone's booking Steve Gadd, they know it's going to be Steve Gadd. He's not going to sound like Vinnie Colaiuta in terms of his touch and his punch and like the way he's going to, there'll be less splash cymbals, that's for sure. I'm not bitching about it. I love Vinnie, but just, to draw the comparison, it's like that guy must have just had the best time in the 70s because he was bringing so much to so many artists as himself. So it's just come in, do you, bring your gear, sound like you, like that. That is the ultimate. I reckon that's all that any of us could hope for as being the pinnacle. Like, I've made it. So, whenever that happens, it's just a beautiful feeling, because I do find if you're being micromanaged, or if you feel like someone really wants you to be doing something that doesn't necessarily come naturally, then for me, other people's experience might be different, but for me, when that happens, musicality tends to taper off fairly quickly, because I'm thinking a lot about what not to do and what to do. It's like the stuff that comes naturally, which is going to be the most intuitive and musical, has to take a back seat. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, they don't want me to play that sort of stuff. Oh, and they're not into that kind of sound, so I'm going to have to stay here and, fuck, all right, I can't use those. You know what I mean? So if you're second guessing yourself, I mean, it usually just indicates that you're probably in the wrong situation. For me, those things often occur if I'm required to sound really big, like a Les Paul through a Marshall, just like fucking ripping some big riffs and shit like that. Yeah, on a couple of levels, that doesn't quite sit with me. I don't actually love volume. Even though, yes, throughout my life, people have been asking me to turn down quite a lot, but I just don't love guitar having a big sound. I find all the stuff happening like below 100 hertz. It just doesn't interest me. It's like, no, that can belong elsewhere in the mix. I don't want to have like a massive sound. Also, maybe recording has helped shape that as well, or that aspect has helped me feel more comfortable in recording situations, because often the bigger something sounds, the harder it is to record it, to both capture it and to sit it in the mix. And I know for drummers, this is certainly the case. Like, so many aspects, like how wide do you want your drums? Like you might have this really wide open overhead sound in like a big wide room, and your toms are panned hard left and right, and like, yeah, there's like the full frequency spectrum is represented by all your kit pieces cumulatively. And on its own, it's like, woo! It might sound epic, like you're at the Ultimate Drummers Weekend and Terry Bozzio's there, and your face is melting, like all the frequencies. But yeah, it's like, all right, cool. If you wanted to add any instruments to that, some shit has to start being, adjusted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we often see, T-tails on toms and things being dampened down. I'm not saying that's the only way, but yeah, often mono overhead is going to be better if there's a denser mix, because if you've got, let's say there's a bright acoustic guitar on the left side and then there's an electric guitar on the right side, if the overheads are really wide, then they're all just going to be like battling for that space. So you get a mono overhead, it's like, cool, now the drums are actually way more focused and those other guys have got more space. So yeah, same goes sound-wise, with guitar. I think that's why small amps over the years have been a thing. Like, Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top uses tiny little amps. Jimmy Page, we would associate him with like high watt amps and Marshalls, but yeah, in the studio he had this little Silvertone thing that he'd use for big, big sounds that translate really well, because they're not necessarily buffing out the mic with all their bottom end. It's just all the frequencies where they need to, like the harmonic information. It's just hitting everything right. And again, I think a lot of that does come down to familiarity as well. Because yeah, I remember someone asking me once about like tone. It was when I was at VCA actually. He was saying, we would think of like Miles Davis' tone as being ideal. It's like, is anyone going to disagree? It's like, nah, you cannot disagree like that. You know, just that as an instrument, like the music that we know. But then, you know, he raised the question, like, how well do we know Miles Davis's tone? Like, we've never heard him in the room. You're listening to his classic shit, like Kind of Blue was recorded in the late 50s. And there's a lot of artifacts there, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, supreme recording for sure, like, which I think stands up today big time. But there still are a lot of things in between what we're hearing now and what was actually going on. And I think it's the same, you know, if everyone's just like fiercely trying to chase a certain bonzo tone, like putting it down to the gear, or with Jimi Hendrix as well. I would suspect if you like, yeah, put some modern mics in front of Jimi Hendrix's guitar cabinet and recorded him into Pro Tools, it would be so fucking trebly. I would suspect, because you can kind of hear it's almost like there's this phantom kind of like wheezy sizzle. Like, it's obviously bright, his Strat tone with a plexi. I mean, yeah, Eddie Kramer was often using condenser mics on his cabs, as well as M160s, which is it's a real focused ribbon mic, which does warm up some transients, but still, you know, it's going to be hitting a console pretty hard and then hitting tape pretty hard. And then that times two, like when you factor in the, you know, the mixing, it's going to be coming back off tape through a console to tape. So there's so much stuff that's aiding the sound in terms of harmonic coloration, which is beautiful. Please don't think for a second I'm trying to take anything away from Hendrix's tone. I'm not, but it's just our perception of where everything sits. Yeah, I reckon that's a big part of why we feel a lot of shit's unobtainable now. Yeah, like there are just a lot of factors with traditional recording techniques, which, yeah, color something. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 And I think it actually works to the benefit of gear manufacturers if they're happy to market things a certain way, be it instruments or microphones or a reverb plugin or something. It's like, you know, this is how you're going to get that sound that you've been wanting forever. It's like, is it? Oh, it's only $200. I'll buy it. And then you open up the plugin. It's like, nah, didn't work. I still sound like shit. You know? Or an instrument or a reissue of a certain thing. And, you know, just all of these things where we, you know, living in hope that we can access the magic of what we're hearing on record. But
how long have we been going for, Ben?
Hour and 22 minutes.
Oh my gosh, that's like flown by.
I know. It's like 3 questions.
Yeah. Do you have time for a couple more?
Yeah, man. Hours. I do, but yeah.
You mentioned that, like, you know, you've got a young family.
Yeah.
How do you go, like, when you've got to go on tour for, you know, ages?
Yeah.
Knowing that, like, you know, you've got a wife and young son at home.
Yeah.
That must be, you know, quite challenging at times.
Yes. Yeah. It's not challenging for me, really, because to be honest, I quite enjoy, I enjoy my own space a lot. And if I'm on tour, I enjoy my own, like, rhythm and ritual that I might be able to make happen. But yeah, very fortunately, you know, my wife being a musician, she gets it, and she's not going to be a handbrake and say, you're not going on this tour. Like, so yeah, it definitely becomes much harder for her to manage stuff, as well as doing her own gigs and rehearsals and recordings and juggling a kid. So yeah, we have to lean a lot on other people when we can, but yeah, it's definitely a compromise for her. You know, of course I miss them a lot, but it is, in terms of technology, it's a pretty good time right now to be doing that stuff, because, you know, all throughout Liam's life, you know, he's 10 now, but every time I've been away, we've been able to do like either Skype or FaceTime, so we can chat face to face, which is way better. Like with a kid, if a kid's holding up a phone to their ear, it's pretty obscure for them, especially when they're really young. So, you know, yeah, when he was much younger, I used to call up. He'd just be like walking around the house doing shit, like playing with Lego, and just leave the phone on the ground. I'd be looking at the roof most of the time, or sometimes at the carpet. He'd just put it down, just be la la la. But he'd kind of enjoy knowing that, you know, I was there in a way. So yeah, that stuff helps a lot. But yeah, it does make it challenging. I find the family thing also makes it challenging when you're not on tour as well, you know. maybe this sounds unfair or unreasonable, but yeah, just trying to manage time can be really tricky. Like most days, I find when 3 o'clock rolls around, it's like, ooh, I better finish what I'm doing because got to start doing some stuff that's not music related. Might be taking Liam to karate or preparing food or just various things. Like, ooh, I've left a big mess in the kitchen, better clean that up. And just doing stuff. It tends to consume a lot of time, which is cool. It's life, but yeah, it also requires time management to be tighter. I think also saying no to a lot more things. Actually, that's something that parenting taught me for sure, was because you're forced to say no to more things than you would have done prior. Sometimes because it's like, oh shit, my kid's sick today. Oh, I'm not going to be able to make it to this or that. So you start saying no to things, or no, not just or, but and maybe you start being more selective too. It's like, if this thing's going to take like this much amount of time and I'm not really into it that much, it's not going to be worth it. Just be ball and chain. No thanks. But then through saying a lot more no's, I think, I don't think I'm just speaking for myself here, because I've spoken to other parents about similar things. Like you just learn that saying no is kind of cool. There's usually a fear attached with it, like, oh, I just said no, they'll never ask me again. But it's like, it's cool. I can't say yes to everything. Like getting comfortable with saying no is pretty important. I think it's really, really important to, if you can, be selective about what you do, to actually, utilize that selective process so that you're only doing stuff that is actually going to, bring the goods with people that you like working with music that, you can fit into naturally.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't always mean it's going to be an easy process, but it's like, no, this is a cool process. I'm happy to slink into this and like give it everything I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess it's like the difficulties of your guitar and the difficulties of time management with family responsibilities. Like, just embracing all the challenges.
The difference is with guitar, I feel like I've maybe worked it out to some degree. With all the other shit, it's still a work in progress, big time.
Like you say, it's all part of life, though.
Yeah.
I was wondering then, how you mentioned that like Angus and Julia work so differently. What's it like doing the Dope Lemon project? Yeah,
that's so I don't play live with Dope Lemon, but I'm involved in a lot of the studio work. Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of, there's sort of like, I get both sides of the coin with that. In like Angus, in the initial stages, like if we're collaborating on a track, he'll let me be quite free within something. Then he'll usually chop up a lot of stuff, get it to how he's liking. Then once he starts getting quite focused in and his microscopes, like, tuned in pretty deep, then he might get really specific about what he wants me to add in addition. So usually there's a few months between me sending him like an initial batch of things and then the second round of like, all right, here's what I want. And he generally wants, and I do respect this because it's something that I fucking hate being on the receiving end, but he wants to get as much as possible. He's like, just do as many takes. Like I want this sort of solo to be ripping, like face melting, but to not sound like this, and it needs to start off low and then just give me as many takes as possible. That sort of shit. Like if I'm ever on the receiving end of that, I don't want to be receiving as many takes as possible from someone, because it just gets mushy and blurry in my perception after a while. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, in terms of like comping and editing from take after take after take, I find my musicality takes a back seat if I go too deep down any of those processes, which is something I'm super grateful for, having recorded, like engineered the last Cat Empire album. They did most of those. They did most of their tracking. The band just doing live takes together, and there was very little like comping or editing. Like very little, as you can imagine. Extremely rare that like mistakes would be happening. Like if there was comping, it'd just be like, I think maybe the energy of the outro on that sixth take was really good, but everything at the start was cool. And then so we'd do that easy. How's that feel? It's like, yeah, that's cool. And then, someone might just say, there was something I did in that second pre-chorus that, I think it was in the second take. Can we look that? And then we just fly that in. It was never much more than that, which, I was super grateful for. because just a natural process. Everyone can still stay on the level where their zoom, like their microscope, isn't so micro. It's like we're still looking at the whole picture and we're feeling the whole picture. Again, I reckon that's a skill that, I'm yet to figure out how to like zoom in and out. Sometimes the way that's required, like if you go hyper forensic with, I find if I go hyper forensic with trying to edit something, it's really hard to get back out of that. It's like, all right, cool, we're done. I've just comped the vocals, and then all I'm hearing, like for the next like day or two, I'm just, the ears like still like tuned into, is that breath? I should have ducked that in level. Oh, I don't know about that crossfade there. I should have pitched that up. You know what I mean? Yeah, which can just happen round and round. So knowing how to let go there can be tricky. I mean, some people have different mechanisms. Just getting away from stuff's good. Being in nature helps a lot. Just listening to birds and wind and water, and I mean, that's another aspect of parenting I've found challenging. Like, you spend your day exposed to noise, and then afterwards there's like a pumped up kid who's just being loud. It's like, my freaking ears. You just want to have a rest from noise, but it's there. I mean, I'm complaining. I have one kid. There are people who have multiples who must be just like copying it in terms of like certain frequencies punching in.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I thought it was like important. It's a massive part of your life. Like, it's interesting to know how you are managing to deal with that on top of everything else. Yeah,
well, I don't know about managing, but scrambling.
What's it been like working with the Cat Empire? Because that's like a whole, exciting energy ball in and of itself.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah. Man, they've been great friends for years, for like 20 years at least. We all got to know each other kind of in the later years, the last 2 years of high school, I guess. We used to play together. We were brought together by Steve Settergreen, piano player. He kind of assembled a bunch of dudes from that. The Cat Empire started, which I was never part of that band, but in terms of individuals, we were playing together, just exploring the world of jazz when we were younger, and it's been so amazing to see them blow up, not just in terms of notoriety, but just blow up as a musical force the way they have. Like, it's quite something. So, I was really stoked when last year they asked if I could engineer their record, which they eventually asked me to mix, which I did, and it was a beautiful process to go through that with them, because obviously their studio experience is deep. They know what's going on, they know how to do it, and it was from an engineering perspective, it was astounding. Like, each day was kind of it was almost exhausting in a way. Like, their energy, like for me, even though I was just sitting there with headphones on most of the time, I actually had drums and bass in the room that I was in. And Felix was in his own booth, piano was in its own room, and Richard Tedesco was playing acoustic guitar in his own room. So just in the space we were at, that was the best way to do it, was to have drums and bass in this big control room. So I had headphones on, and they would just punch take after take at, like, as if it's like New Year's Eve. I'm serious, like, just everything just beautiful, the energy, and it actually broke through so many things that that I've seen over the years, and that I've experienced personally over the years, of like, I've done a few too many takes of that. My fingers are a bit sore. Maybe we just have a rest, or don't we have it in that third take? Do we really need to do another one? There was none of that shit. It's just, they would just charge. And some of the songs are long too. We're talking like 7 minutes of, it's a lot of focus. A lot of the record was done with click as well. And, just everyone was so focused and punching it out with maximum energy. Especially Felix. Man, that guy has vocal chops of doom. Like, each day we'd do usually 2 or 3 tracks, but a lot of takes of each. Like, they'd be refining some things. They'd been rehearsing them, we'd track a bit, come back and listen. Like, why don't we try that in this section? I reckon that part needs to lift, but then we'll bring it down there. Or why don't we try another tempo? So there'd always be that sort of workshopping going on, which is great. I think it's really important to be open to that whilst tracking. Again, just to branch off for a second and talk about that demo-itis quality. Sometimes I find when there's too much pre-production goes into something. This is what I've found personally as a player. It's like all your musical juice just naturally goes into that. When you're getting to know a song, especially when everyone's getting to know a song, there's so much fertility there for parts and for feeling and for where you naturally leave the space. No one's really thinking about it. I've found that if I've been involved in pre-production for something and then you go in to do the actual album, it's almost always a downgrade. You know, you're just looking for stuff. You go back and listen to demos. It's like, fuck, that just sounded better. You know, I've been involved in that a lot. So yeah, personally, I find that, I don't know, maybe I just have a short or a fairly shallow bag when it comes to what I can offer to something. But yeah, generally it's, the more, earlier on, what am I trying to say? I think I've probably said it anyway, but yeah, earlier on in my relationship with a song, like the stuff's going to be better. But anyway, they'd be refining stuff, like might do like 12 or 13 takes, high energy, pumping through, cans like blasting. And then they decide like, that was awesome. We've got it. It was either, you know, take 13 was great, but also take 11. So, okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to go have a lunch break. Anyone want anything? And then Felix will come in. He's like, hey, I might just try to do a few more vocal takes. Like, whoa, dude, you've just blasted out like 13 takes consecutively. You know, I've got my mics gained way back. Actually, on that SM7 that you're singing through, that you're speaking through, that sounds great on his voice. We had another one up as well from the studio that was also great. But yeah, we used the SM7 on a lot of things. And yeah, I'd have that. It's not a high gain mic, as you know, but it'd be gained way back because he's just punching out so much volume and energy. And it's insane, man. Like when going through tweaking the vocal tones and sorting out the comps, just listening to the vocal on its own, the energy is immense. And yeah, I wanted to mention that because I think it's just worth acknowledging. Like I respect that so much because, you know, singers can really fatigue, but I don't know how he does it, man, but he just hammers it out. And so many good takes, like,
wow,
one after the other. It's like, wow, man, this is all good stuff. He did a lot of the comping himself, actually, which was great. But yeah, he was happy to sit through and pick out the best bits and send me, you know, his Pro Tools files with the comps in there.
Great,
which is great.
Yeah,
it suited me well because I could be working on other things at the time. But yeah, overall, working with those guys was awesome. And then, you know, dealing with the mix was great too because they all had really clear ideas of what they wanted and where they wanted it to go, how they wanted it to go, and yeah, just, you know, obviously there's different people might have had different opinions, so, you know, you have to try often different iterations before a consensus can be reached. But yeah, I definitely loved and respected all of those moves that were made, everything that they suggested. It's a lot of responsibility, I think, like, you know, having someone's sound in your hands, like their overall sonic quality, you know, how they wanted it. With this particular record, yeah, they did want it to sound a bit more live, a bit more maybe open than some of the things they've done in the past. Yeah, there's some strings on there, big brass, heaps of percussion, just, you know, stuff you'd expect. It's coming out soon. In fact, by the time this podcast's out, maybe that record will be out, but we'll see. Oh,
yeah, cool.
There you go.
It's always good when the new music's coming out.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been taking so much of your time that I should probably wrap up the pod.
It's up to you, man. I'm happy.
But it's nice chatting.
Likewise, man. Thanks heaps for coming.
No, of course. Thanks for having me back a second time.
No problem.
Sorry the first episode was lost to the wind.
Oh, yeah.
But this has been a really
Was that going
to
be explained? Should we talk about that?
Maybe briefly.
All right. I'll take responsibility, but yeah.
No, it's definitely all my responsibility.
Well, I reckon what happened, like Luke was here last time, we had a chat. I think we went for like 3 hours, right? We're just going on about, just me talking about me, basically. But yeah, Luke brought over his rig, everything was set up, we were rolling, and then we started talking, and then I said, hang on, so is there like a cool soundtrack? Like, what brings us in? Is it like Korn or Rage Against the Machine? Like, what did we hear before this podcast? And then you said, let me show you. And I think when you did that, you must have switched your interface to the internal speakers in the computer, so you could, in your laptop, so you could show me. Yeah, and then and then the next day I got a message.
It was just the worst feeling ever.
Nah,
I got
man.
home and it was like, all right, I'll just check in a couple of things. And then I was like, oh no, I've just recorded the whole chat with the internal computer.
Which wasn't the worst. Like, you could still hear us, but it would have been the sort of thing if you were listening in the car. Just would have, like, the noise floor would have been a bit annoying.
Oh yeah, and your hand would have had to be on the vocal knob, just like up.
Yeah,
Ben talks,
exactly.
or Luke's asking a question,
Yeah,
crank
yeah,
it all the way back down, and then back up. And
Yeah.
oh,
So the conclusion was, no worries. Let's do it again in 2025. So here we are.
thanks so much for having me back.
Hey, man, anytime.
Actually, before we go, then,
Let's do it.
well, I've got to ask you the 5 questions, but
Oh, shit.
but can I ask you one more? Like, let's have one more discussion point.
Please, yeah.
I absolutely love your album, Samsura.
Thank you.
It's stunning and wonderful.
Thanks, man.
And I was wondering, like, listening to you talk about all the different, like, session work that you do, I think, like, if I was to put the label on it, tell me how you feel about this.
Yeah.
But the way I see you is much more of as an artist rather than like a traditional session musician, because there's so much of like your voice. The way you describe, like, Steve Gadd comes in and plays and it sounds like Gadd. He's not doing the like, all right, I'll adjust myself to be whatever you want. It's like, I'm here to play. So it is a session musician thing, but you know, most of the music that you make and the roles you play, it's you, much more like an artist than the like jack of all trades type. How do you feel about that?
Well, man, I'm stoked that you would see it like that, because I feel like when I was younger, the idea of, you know, being a session player felt really appealing. And there are so many great guys to look up to when that certain thing existed. I don't feel like it's so much of a thing anymore, but you remember there would have been like a golden era for like session cats, like
Yes.
Steve Gadd being one of them. And I guess dudes like him are quite an exception. And in guitar world, you know, there are dudes who you would just see showing up on so many records. Some of them would be quite generic, and that's why they'd get booked. It's like, okay, this guy has that sound, so we'll get it. But, you know, there would be others. I feel like a guitar equivalent of Gadd, although not necessarily era linked, would be this guy Mike Landau. He hasn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those two would have played together in James Taylor's band, and I think they've done other stuff. But yeah, he's cool because he's more than cool. But I feel like he really embodied like the spirit of Hendrix. It's not like he was copying all these licks, even though he can play that way. But it's like he really took on, that spirit. You know, kind of like loose, raw, but within the confines of where he needs to be. I feel like he's always been an inspiration in terms of like a session cat that hasn't been necessarily generic. But I mean, doing that instrumental record, Samsara, was for me like an exploration, because, you know, people had been asking for time, like, when are you putting out an album, man? My answer was always like, no idea, because I don't even know what it would be. Partly because, you know, instrumental guitar albums, I actually find I'm quite allergic to them these days. You know, often you put them on, it's like, oh God, rank. So I found it, it was a real exploration in like, what would I actually like to listen to? Like, I don't think there are any solos on that album, really. You know what I mean? Like, people would be expecting like, oh, it's going to be fucking shredding on that album. But
Yeah.
it's not that vibe at all. I was just searching for sounds, and often that search would begin if I had been working on something, and if I had a sound up, like maybe I'd been going for like the wild card part or something. I had something up, I'm like, this is fun, I'd just be noodling. Maybe I'm waiting for something else to load up, or just finish the session, or I pick something up and it's in a different tuning that I might have just used in something that I'm not familiar with. And that would often be the genesis of like what would become a track for that record. I just record it and be like, all right, cool. I'll just shelve this for later. So I had a little library of stuff, of like noodles, my own noodles, which I would go through and often just use those noodles as like the final part, and then add stuff. You know what I mean? When I say final part, it's like, okay, cool. Well, this is going to be the beginning of something, and I'll just add other stuff. That is why, you know, some of it does sound a little lo-fi, but that was also an aesthetic that I wanted as well. Like, most things were recorded in mono, and that was very deliberate. A lot of ribbon mics. It's not I reckon if I did it now, I would probably try and get more I don't know. Yeah, it does sound a little flat to me. I was going for, I don't know, I know it's an overused term, but vintage in terms of the sonic spectrum. I didn't want anything particularly glassy sounding, but yeah, I think now I would try and open that up a little. But have I deviated far from your question?
No.
I'm just, yeah, generally, yes. Thank you, man. If you see me as having those sort of flavors, then that's great. Because, yeah, I think generic sesh is like, we know it. So looking for other shit, I think is important. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that was the link that I didn't say. Is like, was the album sort of like the step into like, I'm going to put myself as the artist in a recorded album and do me, and yeah, like have something like that where it's output as you, but like only you, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, yes, but not necessarily. And again, this is something that I think a lot of people maybe misunderstood about the process. I was just doing it really as an exercise, like to find what it would be, because I just didn't know what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. In terms of like instrumental stuff that I enjoy, like Daniel Lanois would definitely be a big influence. Like I find his sonic sensibilities are just, yeah, beautiful. So yeah, I mean that was kind of like the first starting point for me. There's also this French composer, his name's René Aubry, he's beautiful. He's been around for, I don't know, maybe 30 years or so, putting out records, and yeah, really beautiful stuff, the way he composes parts and orchestrates things. It's really like pristine in a way, even though like pristine isn't a quality that I would like to associate with my playing or my approach. But yeah, there's just something about, I don't know, I suspect that maybe it does stem from French folk music, because you hear it in a lot of more contemporary French artists as well. There's like a really clear quality to how the parts are created. Mm-hmm. It's like stuff's not blurred. Air would be an example, like the way they make parts, even though it's far from being like traditional folk French music. Yeah, it's just the understanding of the significance of parts is huge. Actually, that was something that I know you were going to wrap up, but the time I spent playing with Gotye was a huge example of that. Like his parts were so meticulously created. That time became, yeah, for me, like getting to embody, like when we were playing live, playing these parts that had a huge amount of significance, even if it's not like the part has to be like loud or dominant, but like at the end of the verse, there's a certain like blink, blink that happens from guitar, and it's like, if it's not there, then other things that interact with that don't kind of make the big picture either. You know what I mean? Just little, yeah, the importance of like the way parts are placed. That was kind of the strongest learning experience I had of that. And it actually, when I came off those tours with Wally Gotye, I felt so musically inert in a way. It's like I'd be trying to come up with parts in the studio. It's like, okay, these work, but if they weren't there, shit's still fine. You know a part has maximum goods where if you take it away, it's like, oh, we're missing something. Especially, I think that's especially special if it's not necessarily a constant part that's taking up a lot of room in the mix. Yeah, I think sound has a huge part to do with that as well, and space. Yeah, and of course, none of this is guitar specific too. Like, the way percussion might embellish a song, or just something subtle might give a certain lift to a chorus or to a section, or yeah. That's the stuff that excites me, and that it's still super unclear as to, like, there's not like a formula for how it is. It takes a lot of hunting, I think, which again goes back around to why I am happy to spend hours sounding like shit on my own before I can commit to something that I would present to someone.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the Gotye thing, so why don't we chat about it a bit more?
Sure, man.
Because people loved that record.
Yeah.
And it was interesting last time we were hearing you talk about what it was like working with Wally. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me, and it'd be nice to hear from you again for our listeners, like that each part had so much intention behind it, so that he was, like you were describing, that he was so particular about everything.
Yeah.
But it was because, not just because he was like a perfectionist, or like it like for the sake of it being what he wanted. It was like there's deep intention on every layer as to how all of this comes together. So it's important, and I'm going to articulate the reason as to why it's so important. And that experience would have been, quite an interesting and different one to do, especially coming off, I think you were doing like Renee Gayer's band before Gotye, which is like the
worlds
opposite.
Apart. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, look, that was amazing for all of us, I think, to go into that level of depth. And I think, we could go in there with Wally because, he had assembled all of these sounds himself. He was so intimately familiar. Like the album was predominantly, I don't know if you know his process, but he samples things, lots of things. And he's been doing it ever since he was a kid, just sampling shit off vinyl, just building up his own libraries of samples of all sorts of things. And then that becomes his palette for creating fundamentals of a song. So he would know those sounds inside out. They were like him. There's sounds that he'd known for years that then become part of a track. And then the makeup of a track in Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever he was using, I think both, whilst making that record, he knew everything inside out. So when it came to recreating that live, I felt like, never before had I experienced like that level of responsibility for like, whoa, okay, this really needs to be exactly how it is, which was, it was tough because there was stuff that I'd be trying to come up with my instruments that were played on totally different instruments that had maybe been sampled on a record and then like pitch shifted, and it's like, I've got to try and come up with an approximation. So there were plenty of times where I wasn't getting exactly like, it's not like this is 100% the right sound, but if that happens, then it's a matter of trying to find the energy, that sound embodied, and trying to do that. And the gig itself, like I reckon the amount of leeway that I felt I had was maybe like 5% to maybe just do something that's not fixed. So it was very, for lack of a better term, rigid. But it never felt unmusical. You know what I mean? It's not like, doing a theater show or something where it is rigid that you have to play the same shit every night. It's like, trying to uphold and meet that level of responsibility, which is what we were all doing. Like everyone on stage, we were, just kind of like cradling these babies of Wally, so he could feel supported and, smash his vocal magic over the top. Also, he's an amazing drummer. Maybe you know that. Yeah, spectacular. His sense of feel and rhythm and energy is unreal. So free.
What was it like playing music in a way that was so particular, like to recreations of these albums?
Yeah.
But like, on some of the biggest stages around the world where like, it's not, we've got all that time and space and we can control all the factors. It's like, you're on this stage and it's outdoors, and now you're in this one and it's at theater, and it's like there's so much like change happening around what you guys are trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would say the one thing that brings consistency to all of that is in-ear monitors. Right. It's huge. It's epic. So you can be at an outdoor festival stage, and then you can be doing an indoor theater, and obviously, I think the biggest differences that would be noticed would be if you're in a rehearsal room and everything's kind of tight and you got shit going through the drum overheads, and then you get on a bigger stage, it's like whoa, my mix is way different. But I find that I'm less, the sort of mix that I would dial up would be less vulnerable to shifts than a singer. Sometimes because the vocal mic might be picking up a lot of other stuff in the room, depending on which sort of mic and how cranked they are. Mm-hmm. Drummers maybe, if they've got a lot of their overheads, but then again, you probably wouldn't. So in-ears are actually mega savior in those regards. And
wow.
Again, I think it's a really good time to be alive, to be doing this stuff in terms of like getting that sort of clarity, especially if you're on a big stage. If someone's far away and you really need to tune into what they're doing, rather than having them like blazing through a wedge to the point where like you've had to crank them, and then because they're cranked, then you have to crank something else, and then it's like, no, I can't hear my acoustic, can I have more? And then it's like, woo, starts taking off, and everything's compromised. You can just sit in your safe zone with the in-ears, and For me personally, I think the best attribute with in-ears is a volume control, so which you dial up or down yourself to the sweet spot. Your ears don't have to get taxed after a gig, because, yeah, man, that's something I found can be punishing. Often it's the gigs that you wouldn't expect. You're like, oh, I won't wear any earplugs on this gig. I don't think it'll be loud, but it might be a festival stage with a fairly low, like one of those canopy ceilings. It's just like punching all these like 2K frequencies back down. It's like, by the end of it, it's like, fuck, my ears are cooked. I don't know if you've ever had that from certain surprise gigs, or
like I wouldn't be able to articulate it as eloquently as you, but yeah, I've been like, I wish I was wearing plugs at this smaller gig.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Hope that answers that. In-ears was huge saver, and also having awesome crew too. On that tour we had great crew. They were all over it. Could really just lean into their expertise as well.
Mm-hmm.
The ears sounded great. We would trust that front of house was awesome. It was really well supported. So it just got to a point where it's like, just do the show. Like, that's all we have to do. Just focus. And in fact, each day we would generally do the show 3 times. So in soundcheck, we'd usually do it once all the way through, or if not all the way through, like most of the way through in order of the set, with Wally on stage, like checking, because he had like his drum percussion station and another mallet cat station and another like vocal area. So he'd be walking around the stage, checking all his stuff, making sure it all sounds good. Then he'd want to go out the front and check stuff with front of house and with lights as well in the venue.
Wow.
We'd all play the set.
Okay.
And then we'd chill for a bit, go and get catering or whatever, and then come back and do the actual show.
Wow.
So that sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah.
You would think that, but dude, somehow, I think it was quite unique in that it never felt like a drag. And I think it really is because there was such responsibility to uphold the integrity of these, beautifully crafted pieces and parts that, like, we all had a really clear, I hate to use the term job, but it was a really clear role. And we were all in there with Wally for it. It's like, let's get in, let's make this as good as we can, because he was so deep into it. It was kind of like an invitation for us to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the case. Some people are cruising through on a tour, and they're maybe not up for the performance, and some people maybe don't even really love the songs that they're required to perform, and all of that will filter through to everyone else who's around them,
mm-hmm.
who's under them in terms of that hierarchy. Yeah.
Do you find that when you're in like the in-ears session, like, what's your interaction like with an audience? Because you don't have that like there's a layer of separation.
Yeah, man, that's a really good point. Yeah, it is tough. I think that's probably the main thing that deters. There are people who don't use in-ears. There'll be some bands where like everyone's on except for the singer, or most people are on except for a couple of guys. But yeah, it's usually that. And the workaround is to have audience mics at the front of a stage, so you can choose how much or how little of those you want in your ears. But it still is a little bit weird. But the cool thing is sometimes I'd pop out an ear, or like half pop out one ear.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a part of the set where you feel like you want to get that, like if the audience are interacting with something, or but that very thing can also be a bit daunting too. You can feel quite exposed on stage, or either exposed or disconnected. Yeah, it's kind of like both of those can occur because of that. Yeah.
What was it like on the like the Gotye tour, where everybody knew the song but maybe didn't know like the rest of the music? There was, you talking about the audience? Yes. Okay, so sorry, of course the band knows everything, but like,
you never know.
There might be people that just come along because they know the new hit, because the song was so big.
Exactly. I would say most people would fit what you're talking about now, particularly when there was a certain time where like it had exponentially peaked, and then I guess promoters and managers were like scrambling. It's like, we got to fucking go to the US like ASAP, which we did, and we were doing like really good festival slots, and I mean, the harsh reality was, particularly at festivals, let's say we got a 1 hour set, like half an hour into it we do somebody that I used to know, and then people are going ape shit, and then we finish playing and it's just like like people just disappearing. It's like, hello, just walking away.
Wow.
Like, that's what they wanted to hear. And I think often his career was misunderstood because that Making Mirrors album, I think it was his third album. Yeah, and people are saying it's his debut album. It's like, no, it's not. He's been around making music a long time. And I think also consequently, after the huge rise of that album, a lot of people have had the question, or almost been critical of like, he hasn't wanted to follow it up. Oh, where is he? He's somebody that we used to know. Where's he gone? It's like, he's just doing what he's always done, which is making music the way he wants to make in the time that he wants to make it until he feels like it's right. Like he doesn't work within the parameters of like the music business the way other people might expect it.
Yeah.
He didn't actually intend that song. Somebody that I used to know almost didn't make it on the record.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that was the last one to be finished. And yeah, for
right.
sure. Yeah.
Wow.
So he wasn't aiming for that to be mega. And to be honest, I don't think he loved a lot of the stuff that came with it and him being mega. That's just not, it's not him at all. Like he's way more, I don't know, grounded and artistic than, the way the common perception is of what happens when someone has a number one or wins a Grammy and all that shit. I remember actually around that time, a lot of people asking me, they're like, oh, what's he like? Must have gone to his head. Like that question would come up a lot. Like,
Right.
No, because he doesn't, I'm sure he's grateful for all of that stuff, but it's not what he's there for. And I don't think it really means much to him. So in that sense, he is a true artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember someone pointed out that like the music video that's got, like 1 billion views or something. Like it's not monetized.
No ads. I know, bro.
It's just, like you say, it's just artistic.
Yeah, I know. And that was absolutely deliberate from him. He didn't want to, jeopardize or, diminish the fact that, come and check this out. It's cool, He could have made a lot of dough from that, for sure, but chose not to. Yeah, it's pretty bold, huh?
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like all good and well to like say, a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm just in it for the music or something. But then like, why would you turn down so much money?
Yeah.
Like it's put the opportunities there. So many more people would just take it.
Yeah.
And potentially, like you'd say, all the questions, oh, it's come to your head or whatever. Like,
yeah.
It changes the person because they're like, oh, money's involved now. So now it's like people will change.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's also like similar reasons are why touring kind of stopped for him at a certain point. Like he realized that the larger the gig, even though the outside perception would be, oh, the bigger the gig, the better it is. For him, he realized the bigger the gig, the less connection there is with the audience and the less subtlety you can have in the music. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the wider the range of sonic experience is going to be for the audience and also for the front of house engineer, like in big rooms, like there's this big arena we're playing in, it's whatever, but it's like the bottom end's probably ringing around for several seconds and just everything's becomes compromised, and that wasn't what it was about for him. So he's like, nah, I never want to do. I did hear, I mean, who knows, maybe he will have changed his mind, but I did hear him say that he never wants to do that sort of touring ever again, just because so much gets compromised. He would happily do, if he was going to do something like smaller, more intimate spaces with like a really high quality PA system, so that band and audience can like be together sharing, a known experience. Something that's clear for him. So it's pretty epic. I'm glad we get to talk about that stuff because I think people know the vibe with Wally, but so much respect. I learned so much from Wally through that time, just through observing. Well, I guess through being invited into his music and just seeing some of his processes and how he feels music. Often his adjectives for describing certain things and the significance of things was like really, like nothing I'd ever experienced. Incredibly. Just the detail, it's insane. Yeah, wild.
While we're chatting about like different people you've worked with, then you're happy for me to continue.
Go for it.
Have you ever seen Mike Landau play?
I have.
Who with?
All right, should we get back in the
all right. I'll ask it on Mike. Have you ever seen Mike Landau play live?
By the way, are you going to edit that out, like We just had a quick wee break, and then we're just like walking in, and yes, have you ever seen Mike Landau play live? Like, yeah, well, let's get on these microphones. So yeah, I have seen him play live. It was in Berlin at a small jazz club called Quasimodo.
Cool.
He was playing with, it was a trio, power trio, with Jimmy Johnson on bass and
Gary Novak on drums.
You got it.
I saw him play in LA.
No way.
At the Baked Potato.
Ah, classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me your story.
Okay. Yeah, so I was living in Berlin at the time, actually. This would have been in 2008, I reckon. Yeah, and it was actually like a real buzz being there. I was there for a year at the time. That was in the early stages with the lady who's now my wife. And yeah, unlike Melbourne, where an international artist might come through like every once in a blue moon, over there, particularly in their summer, it's just cool shit coming through the whole time.
Wow.
Not just the jazz clubs, but, just great shit happening. Like European or American artists, just, they'll come over and do a big run of summer festivals and then a whole bunch of sideshows. So Berlin would very often be included because, they've got a lot of great venues there of various sizes. So we got to see a lot of cool shit during that time. And I'd always keep an eye out on what was going on at Quasimodo because often, New York cats would be coming out and doing things and Landau was there. And, I have been an appreciator of that guy's, musicality and approach for a while and went to this gig and it was cool. There was one aspect that I came away with. I was there. So yeah, it was a jazz club. It wasn't particularly large. They were loud too. Like he had I think he would have hired a backline quad box. He was probably touring with the amp. He had I think it was a Bob Bradshaw CAE amp. And yeah, they were punching it out. And it sounded great. Like, yeah. But yeah, I noticed like every time he was doing shit on his pedal board, like all these like German necks were like giraffes, like craning up to like, what's he doing? Oh. Which button is he pushing? What's the pedal? But and I was looking around like these fucking clowns. But then I realized like I'm one of them. Like I'm doing the same. I was kind of appalled by myself. Like what an idiot. Just enjoy the music. Don't worry about the gear. But I think he's one of the ones that there's like all this anecdotal shit about, it's the voodoo magic that guy possesses in terms of his tone and special mods that his gear might have had and this, that, and the other. Like it's kind of a mystery. It's like, how does he do certain shit? Like in terms of like single coils, getting them to sound the way he does. So meaty and juicy and airy and just all the adjectives you would like to throw at that sort of situation. He seems to have nailed, but yeah, that's actually the main thing I remember about that gig. It's like, fuck, do I really want to be that? And I guess leading up to then, I kind of had been, in terms of all those things, like, trying to get stuff modded, not always just to be like him, but the idea was, there was a certain time, I don't know if there's an equivalent in drum world, but getting stuff modded was always a thing. Like you buy an instrument, it's like, oh, I'm going to get these new pickups put in, I'm going to get this modded and that's going to be tweaked. It's like, ends up being really expensive and then often harder to sell that shit on. But yeah, luckily those days aren't, anywhere near as fertile for me anymore. In terms of like trying to make something that it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have the tool for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a cool gig, man. Like, yeah, in terms of just them functioning as a trio, it was like,
yeah, that's
beautiful.
A special group.
Yeah.
I saw them in 2014, I think.
Right.
Yeah, in LA at the Baked Potato.
Wow, man.
Because my dad took me over to see like Abe Laboriel play with his jazz ministry band. Yeah. So it's like Abe Senior on bass, Abe Junior on drums, Greg Matheson on keys, and Mike Landau on guitar. Yeah, at the Baked Potato.
Oh, dude.
So they were playing like 2 nights.
Do you have earplugs?
Yeah.
That place gets loud.
It does. Yeah. But Mike's trio played like the middle night. Like they played
really?
like Friday and Sunday or something.
Yeah.
And his trio played the middle night.
Wow.
And so we were there for all of it. And it was just like amazing. But the thing that stands out as seeing Mike Landau play that I wanted to like ask about was like, I've never seen anyone touch their pedal board so much. And he had 2 amps. So he was running like a wet and a dry.
Yeah.
Like a twin and a hot rod. And so he had like 2 pedal boards, one for each one. And it was like all, some sound stuff on one and then all the like reverbs and delays on the other.
Yeah.
And like if you close your eyes, you would not tell that stuff was going on because he's just constantly playing like amazing sounding stuff.
Yeah.
But to watch him, it was constantly like tweaking this and touching this with his toes and adjusting this and doing that. And it was just like, you know, the perfect sound for every moment. But like I've never seen anyone fiddle and play with like their gear so much whilst also playing.
That's wild. Maybe that's a byproduct of him being a studio guy predominantly. He's just used to doing that, and he's also tuned into the subtleties of, you know, what can happen. Chances are, if he'd grown up in like Austin, Texas as a blues cat, he'd be like, yeah, I got 2 pedals. And this is how I set them. The rest is in my hands. And I mean, yeah, Mike's hands are amazing. He also rides his volume knob a lot as well, which, you know, it's a beautiful thing. On the topic of the baked potato, I don't know if you've ever encountered Jeremy Allsop, bass player. Lives in Melbourne. He's been around for ages. He's unbelievable muso. He was living in the US for a while. He's got so many stories, man, about the stuff he's done over there, what he's seen, who he's played with, sessions he's been on. I remember him saying that he was good friends with Eddie Kramer, the engineer, and hung out with him a lot. And I don't know if it was through that or some connections. He got to sit in on like a Herbie Hancock session, like in the room. I don't know if he was assistant engineer. Yeah, he said he felt like he was just levitating. He's like, this is insane. But he was at the baked potato once. I assume this would have been like 80s or 90s, just checking out whatever was happening. He was down there. I guess he was living in LA, and Jeff Porcaro and Steve Lukather showed up to sit in. Like they'd just done a session somewhere together, and everyone's like, yeah,
of course,
yeah,
the heyday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, they were just coming and jamming with their mates because that was their local hang. So I'm sure for those guys that'd be awesome because you've been in the studio all day on Best Behavior, and then you can do your shit, which they must have done a lot because you hear there's so much freedom and spirit in their playing, which you wouldn't always associate with the safety required to be a session guy. When you, especially those days, like studios would have been like per hour, like huge rate. It's massive amount of staff. It's like the pressure is on. But those guys have so much, freedom and spirit that they have that live energy, you know. They always bring it with them. Anyway, Jeremy said that, you know, in the set break, he went out the back to smoke a ciggy, and there were 2 limousines parked there. It was like one for each of them. So that was just sort of their hang. So in the set break, they were there, like just disappearing into the limo. He's like, don't know what was going on. Well, you got a pretty fair idea what was going on. It's like a lot of white powder and probably some ladies. And yeah, that's just how they roll. They just got limos to drive them around, probably to and from the sessions as well, because they would have cartage. You know, people showing up, setting up, tuning, rigging up their gear. You just come in and play. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever listened to the I'd Hit That podcast. That's also a very drum-centric one that, has other instrumentalists on it occasionally. Steve Lukather was on that, I remember once, talking about Jeff. That was really cool. Just to hear him speak about, you know, the kind of, growing up and that kind of brotherhood that whole band, Toto, ended up having and what it was formed from, and, their musical experiences together. I've actually found it surprising to hear from Steve Lukather, you know, saying that the majority of the sessions that those guys did, like they weren't really into. They were kind of shitty because you see them in liner notes of like really cool shit, but he was saying that those ones, sure, they're cool, but there was just a lot of stuff that was real crappy. I remember him talking once about doing something for some guy who was like some LA fitness guru.
Okay.
And and he had all this dough, and he wanted to hire those guys to do like some high octane soundtrack to, maybe it was like a VHS coming up, and he was calling the shots in the studio, and apparently Jeff wasn't into it. And he just started like taking off his clothes slowly, like piece by piece. Like he took off his shirt and he'd do the next take, and then he'd take off his pants, and then they'd do a few more takes. This guy's still crapping on, they're just nodding, and then eventually Jeff's just like nude, just playing the drum, just taking the piss out of the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve's book was a really good read for like a whole bunch of his like stories and like his thoughts on playing and stuff.
Nice. I wasn't aware of it. I'll try and check it out.
Yeah, he wrote like an autobiography of tales and stuff.
Unreal.
Like, I don't know how long ago, maybe 5-6 years ago or something.
Sick.
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
I bought it for my dad, but maybe I'll drop it off sometime.
Thanks, man. I know he's been popping up on a lot of things online now, whether they're podcasts or not. Actually, there's a question for you, not related to music specifically, but I'm noticing more than ever lately in terms of podcasts. You know, it always used to be, I listened to this podcast, but now it's like, I've been watching this podcast. Like the visual element's becoming such a big part of it. Why do you think that is? Is it because YouTube is now people's main stop for information? Is it to support that?
Yeah, there's like been a shift in like podcasting land.
Yeah.
Where like podcasting was audio.
Yeah.
But Google closed their like podcast platform. So there's no like, there's apps you can download for Android listening, but the actual Google podcasts closed. And they said, we're just going to host the podcasts on YouTube.
Sure.
And then Spotify entered they bought one of the podcast hosts. And they're, you know, trying to compete with YouTube and stuff. So they said, we're going to push video podcasts really hard. So if you want to get like, you know, Spotify attention, then don't give us an audio podcast, give us a video podcast.
Right.
So there was this bit of like, you know, big player play from the like tech scene.
Yes. Yeah.
And all of the like podcasters are kind of like, oh, I was in it just for the audio.
Yeah.
But then you've got like the massive ones like Joe Rogan that were streaming their stuff already.
Yes.
And so...
And people are taking it from there. Because I noticed the production values are getting pretty slick too. Because that, that started off pretty lo-fi too, Joe Rogan's thing. But now you see shit, it's like, whoa, okay.
Oh, yeah. And like Listener, you know, the like Australian radio station now, podcast label, they were like Fox FM, which is like podcasting branch basically. They invested like $5 million in this like multi-studio room for podcasts, where it's like fully set up with all of the like microphones and cameras built in, so that you get that really slick like, you know, close-ups of each person and multi-angles, and they can just like have a team to chop it all together. So there's like a mega shift of investment in this like video podcast. I guess in my mind, I think it's more just like it's replacing TV. Yeah, because you'd watch an interview on like the television. For whatever, like an hour or something. Maybe it's like a deep dive, and 60 minutes is interviewing someone, but no one really watches TV anymore. So like that's just moving to YouTube.
Far out.
But like I'm chatting to a lot of like musos that aren't like, I want to be on camera.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're like, I just play music and I'm not the artist. I'm just like hanging out at the back. Yeah. So I don't really want to be on camera either. So I've been holding back from doing it. Yeah. A couple of people have said, can you film me? And so there's a couple of video ones, but mostly I've just been adding a little video at the end that I can like promote on the socials. Nice. So that like there's a video element, but it's not. It's nice to have the conversation off cam.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little more relaxed, perhaps. Like, if we had some cameras now and red lights flashing, maybe we'd...
Right, you're starting to think about, there's this other thing here as well.
I probably wouldn't have been swearing as much as I did, so sorry anyway. Or do you edit that shit out?
No. Just put the little E in. And,
nice. Yeah. Excellent.
No, so maybe next time I can bring a camera rig.
No, it wasn't like, man, where's the camera? I want me time to shine. No, nothing like that.
It's just like, for me, the workload is high when you add video, because like there's a lot of storage and that's a lot more editing and lights and, you know, all that stuff.
It's mega.
Yeah.
It's probably not too far away where there'd be some sort of AI program where you can do like, you know, just come up with a little character for each person. It's like, cool, if you want visuals, just let AI adapt a little cartoon to this.
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking of that, or like the mouths that just
open. Less work.
Yeah. But for now, I'm like, I feel weird like talking to musicians about like human artistry and then having like an AI generated image of our faces like shift as like this is like a weird futuristic, like we're all about like humans creating, but then also we're going to use a computer to create all the... I have mixed feelings.
But maybe that would also represent, you know, where a lot of the creativity in music is going to, because there's a lot of conversations right now about like what is AI going to eclipse in terms of creative music, and it seems like, you know, there's quite a lot.
Yeah. Have you found like, is there music making stuff that like, I don't know, people don't call you as much because they can get type in guitar backing track and it like comes up with stuff?
That's maybe happening. So I wouldn't know if those were the reasons for not getting calls. I mean, I still feel like I definitely have enough work. I reckon in terms of drummers being replaced by technology, and it's not necessarily AI.
The Logic Studio drummer.
Exactly, that sort of stuff has been around for a
Yeah.
while, and it's great, and people can lean on that more than most other instruments. But I know there's a lot of great, sample libraries and virtual instruments that do really good guitar-y things, which are totally cool. Like if someone uses that as a tool and it enables them to, take their music in a certain way, then it's useful. Like there's no reason to be critical of it. But yeah, I think the biggest threat that I'm hearing about, or the most imminent, is going to be for production music, or like incidental music in films and television, where it's like, all right, we need this piece that goes for 1.5 minutes. It needs to have like a surfy kind of vibe, like upbeat, like AI can pump that out. And it's doing it pretty well now whilst it's in its infancy. So as that shit grows exponentially, it's just like, okay, there, all the people who've been employed for those tasks, like we need this music done to a brief. It's like, AI can do it just fine. Or even to the point, coming up with lyrics or melodies or, it's like, we need this thing to sound like a real dense Hans Zimmer sort of thing, or give this a John Williams epic kind of quality. Like AI, I mean, I don't know how good it would be at nailing it now, but if it's not, it's not far off. I've heard some of the stuff it can do, and it's amazing. Like it's daunting on one hand, but also like, wow, that's probably exciting. I mean, it just gives people a lot more access to things that would have otherwise been out of reach, in terms of like a certain sound that you could integrate into your own music or what you might be inspired by. But at the same time, it's like, there's a lot of people whose livelihoods are very close to being eclipsed. I know in terms of music production, even though there's a lot to be critical of, but there's AI mastering programs, for example, that can assess a lot of information and spit out something that in some instances can be a really good product. But again, I don't know if how far that will go, but we can be certain there are people like pushing it far, knowing that if it can take, then it's good. And I'm sure mixing won't be too far behind. Like we won't be too far off where you can just feed a multi-track session to a program and say, hey, I want this to sound like a Bob Clearmountain mix from like similar to this era. Like, can you dial it up? Like or at least, to get a starting point. And of course, like, it's not like you can ever expect to get the real deal, but if people on lower budgets, like really low budgets, can get really like towards the ballpark, then it's not a horrible thing, and there'll be a use for it too, right? So it's interesting, and I don't know. There's so many question marks because everything's changing a lot. Not just in this particular avenue, but just the world, life. It's like shit is changing. It's an epic time for change right now. And it can feel daunting. Some of it's probably really good. I mean, other things, it's like, ooh, how do we keep up with that? Or like, that's scary to think, as a parent too, you think, oh, whoa, what's going to be like, for my son when he's like, even in 10 years time, like totally, or even now, it's like, it's a totally different way of life, different exposure to the world than what I would have remembered as a kid. And what would have existed for you, when you were that age too. Like, shit's just radically shifting. But
I didn't have a computer at school until like year 10.
Yeah, right.
It was like, I don't know, Julia Gillard or Kevin Rudd like had a school program, and it was like, okay, so like now in year 10 I'm learning to like type stuff at school.
Yeah.
But like, the other kids, that was like 3 years earlier, they're in year 7, and it's like their whole high school was with the computer.
Yeah.
So even like within that 3-year period, it's like,
huge shift, huh?
I didn't know high school as computer. That was only half.
Yeah.
But like, so imagine what it's like for your 10-year-old son now, like 20 years later or whatever. Like, it's wild.
It's wild to think, hey, there's so much that will exist that we can't even fathom right now. And there's so much that we know right now that won't exist. I mean, a positive aspect for music making, a lot of people who I've had this conversation with, like musos, have agreed that it's, the prevalence or the ubiquitous nature of technology, in our lives, is becoming more and more and more, is probably going to shift our value of like live music creation much higher. Like if you can go and see a band playing live and you know that they're not necessarily leaning on track and it's just people interacting and creating in real time, then that in a way will be kind of rarer. It's like, okay, there's no bullshit here. This is just these people doing it, making it now. You know, I think our need for that intimate feeling probably won't be, probably will need more nourishing in future. Whether that becomes a conscious thing or not, I don't know. But that to me sounds, feels like it's a pretty likely positive outcome.
Yeah, that's a really lovely
music.
Positive view of the value of live music increasing.
Yeah, because I feel like even the pandemic helped that in a big degree. I mean, for me as a muso, it actually helped me appreciate touring. Like prior to, being everything closing down for a few years. Yeah, touring. Yeah, there are fun aspects when it comes up. But it's also like, sometimes you can become a little desensitized when you are doing, the same thing, most nights of the week and you're traveling around a lot. Like, you can easily forget that the experience is special. Like, you're on stage playing something that and you're, like, invested in it, sure. But, like, there are people there who months before might have, like, slept out just to get the first tickets and, like, they'd be so excited, pumped about it for ages. And you can lose perspective of that. So I think, as a performer, once tours started coming up again after COVID, like, it's like, wow, I definitely don't take this for granted. The interactions with people, like, just the whole thing of it, that had always been there just felt so much more special.
Yes.
And I think audience appreciation also felt elevated as well, because it's like, yes, we've really missed this.
Yeah.
We bought tickets for this, and the lockdowns happened, and then we bought tickets 2 years later, and then that had to shut down because some asshole got COVID on a tram or something, then the whole, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, let's not take this for granted, because it's a really beautiful interaction that, that we can have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I take a photo of you whilst the light is nicely coming in the window?
Man. Yeah.
I just noticed that, like, the cloud had moved whilst you were talking.
It's looking good.
Yeah.
Is the light good?
Yeah, is that cool?
Yeah, I'm pretty hairy. Are people listening to this?
They can be.
I don't really have a photo face.
I thought, like, after as many photo shoots as you would have been involved in on tour.
I'm the worst, man. Need some more goes.
Just a couple. All right, something like this is going to be cool.
Great.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course, man. Good light. You're right.
It's just like...
This guy knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because it's soft and just...
Yeah.
But, like,
I think that was the challenge last time in the other room.
Yeah.
It was like, how do we do this?
Yeah. For whatever reason today. I think, like, where you're sitting and, like, it's interesting in the studio. Because with all of your gear, like... Yeah, it's so serious.
So serious.
All right, cool. Thank you.
This is serious shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about music. Maybe I should include the photo shoot in the podcast.
Why not? It's a good sound. Someone could sample it. It's a new backbeat.
That's true.
Yeah, it's good. Bit of a flam. That shutter speed.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Ka-chonk.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up with the final 5 questions.
All right. Shit. Here we go.
We've been going so long, and I'm having the best time,
How long are we? Jesus. Sorry, any religious people out there. It's 3 hours.
The Jerry Pentazis did a similar thing where he came over. Do you know Jerry?
Yeah.
Jerry came for his hour, and then I was like, cool, like, we'll wrap up. And he was like, I'm actually liking chatting. Are you happy to keep going for a bit? And I was like, yeah, I'll go for as long as you want. And then he stayed another, like, 2.5 hours.
Excellent.
But I was like, the chat was just good. If anyone wants to listen, I think I'm just going to leave it, because if you're invested enough to get through, like, the first hour...
Yeah, maybe someone's got a plane trip or a long drive or something. Like,
yeah.
They're usually the times I listen to podcasts.
Exactly.
I don't watch podcasts because, I would generally be here to do that. And it's like, if I'm here, I'm not going to be wasting my time. So, shit. Right. If anyone stayed this long, thanks. Hope it's been interesting.
I definitely think so. If they're anything like me, it's just such a privilege to sit here and listen to, an amazing musician like you tell us about, like, what you've been thinking about and working on.
Oh, nice. Well, thanks. I'm happy to waffle on.
Ben, what is your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
All right. Let me think.
Other than your home studio, which is just a beautiful place.
Oh, cheers. All right. Yes, I reckon this might not be a big surprise, but I think Hamer Hall. I think we're quite lucky to have that as a space. Like it feels like quite, even though you can fit, a reasonable amount of people. I don't know what the capacity is, but it's a very intimate feeling. Yeah, I've done a range of things there. Sorry, this sounds like I'm pumping up my tires, but yeah, I've been involved in a range of different things there, and it always feels like there's an intimate relationship between the audience and whoever's on stage. Like it's exposed. And sound-wise, it's quite exposed too, because there are some stages where you're feeling something on stage, and it's nothing like what's happening out front, and I don't like that. That can be tricky, Sometimes, on stage, something can sound utterly horrible because there might be a boxy frequency in the corner that you're in, or there's a low ceiling and the drums are tubbing up and everything's harsh, but then out front it might open up and you're like, oh, okay, you just have to trust that that's a thing. But there I feel like it's just beautiful, like honest spot to be doing the do. So that's my answer there.
What would be your dream venue to play?
Yeah. Good question. Okay. Yeah. Can I have already played there?
Yeah.
And it was a dream? All right. Red Rocks. Yeah. Which was, that was pretty epic being there. That's exquisite. Such a beautiful feeling. It's pretty high altitude. Like Denver, Colorado is, they call it the Mile High City. That's 1.6 Ks above sea level.
Wow.
So you're there, but that's a plateau. So it's weird. You don't feel like you're elevated.
Huh.
Then you got to go up higher, like significantly higher to get up there. And on either side of the stage, there are oxygen tanks because, people can be up there just singing as they normally would, start to get faint. Like, fuck, what's going on? You just go over, like, put the mask on, take some oxygen, come out, do the rest of the set. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, it's a thing. But look, in terms of just being in this incredible space, like, behind the, you're facing up. This beautiful amphitheater, everyone's on this raked, like, red rock amphitheater. And, behind the stage, there's natural rock formations. And, it's just an exquisite space that is well enough established that it's, a beautifully run machine. It's like a pleasure to play. So, I think I've ticked off my dream venue. I can't think of... I mean, there might be others, for the prestige. I mean, I've been lucky enough to play at Royal Albert Hall a couple of times with Angus and Julia, which... it was a really special thing, just knowing the history of it. But, but again, sometimes you got to wonder about those things too. It's like you can be dazzled by the name or the prestige of something, but it might not mean that you're going to do a better gig than you would have otherwise. In fact, it could work against you because people might be particularly heightened about doing a certain gig. It's like, oh, the people from the record company have flown over at this gig and these other guys are here. Like the guest list will just be maxed out at those sort of gigs because everyone's just like chomping to be in there. But anyway, long answers to your fucking rapid... Sorry, bro.
No. What is your hot beverage order?
It would be a... tea of some kind, generally non-caffeinated, or like a tisane, as I've learnt they're known. Kind of the hard way, actually. Again, should I snip myself off giving you the long answer?
No, let's go for it. We're already in.
So what we know as herbal teas, right? Tea is tea, right? It comes from the tea plant, so it's caffeinated. It's black tea, white tea, green tea. They're all the same plant, just at different ages. So if you're talking about a tea, typically that's it. But we get to know... I'll have a ginger tea, or like I was offering you peppermint tea, as if tea is mixing water with leaves. But Charlotte and I went to Morocco about 6 years ago, and everywhere we went, we were being offered mint tea. We're like, oh, okay, thanks. And it was like turbo sweet. They put heaps of sugar in there, but it's really nice. It's refreshing. And we were feeling pretty wired, like having really shitty sleeps. And then we realized that for them, it's actual like tea. They'll be putting green tea with the mint leaves. Oh. Yeah. And so after a few days, we're like, oh, okay, we've got to ask for peppermint tea. So we started doing that, and no one got it. They're like, what? No, but you peppermint tea. Yeah, sure. And it was like, no, this has green tea in it. Like, yeah, that's what you asked for. It's like, no, just the peppermint. Like what? Just in water. It was the weirdest thing for them. Yeah. So anyway, I believe, in France they call those the tisane. It's like, so anyway, some sort of tisane would be my hot beverage of choice. I don't drink much coffee, but if I was, it would be like a flat white with oat milk. Small size.
What's your favourite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
Well, the thing is, I usually don't eat late, but back in my past, the things that would be open typically would be like, if it was like real late, we're talking like 20 years ago, it'd be like Pancake Parlor or La Poqueta.
Oh yeah.
Or Stalactites on Russell Street. I remember Carlo Barbaro took me there to get the first ever souvlaki I'd ever eaten. He couldn't believe I'd never had one. Like, what? He's like, we're getting a fucking souv. It was like 2 a.m. It was awesome. But yeah, those days are over. I didn't do that shit anymore. I just want to wake up feeling like better, not worse.
All right, and finally, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
All right, there's probably a few. The most, I probably can't mention them. Some of them on this podcast, to be honest. Yeah, bro. I don't know. I mean, do people often go a little blank when you ask that? Because actually, I think I know what it would be. It would be, and some people did give me this advice. It's like, develop singing skills, because it's a real cool thing to just be part of that aspect of being a muso, whether you want to be the front man or not, man or woman, just have that there. I can sing some BVs, but I'm just generally not all that comfortable doing it. I feel like guitar playing diminishes in its quality when I do that, But I know that's just also practice of that flex as well. And I think because I can't bring much singing ability to the table, that's maybe another reason why I've accumulated a lot of different ammunition, like a lot of different instruments that I can bring along. So it's like, I can bring this, but I'm not the one who can be like smashing those high harmonies like a lot of guitarists can. That's often the expectation. It's like, you can sing, can't you? It's like, no, I can't bring a lot to the table there. I mean, it's not too late either. Maybe my older self would be telling myself now to sort that shit out. So maybe I should, but yeah, I'm happy to jump on some parts if I feel like they're comfortably within my range. But I always admire people who can just like, oh, what's that? What are those? Oh, okay, and just go for it whilst playing the shit out of guitar. I mean, Tony Floyd
talent.
being another example on drums, he's just singing out whatever, punching it out, and
high too, like
exactly, and it doesn't mess up his all the independence of all the limbs, whilst drumming. So yeah. That's the most podcast friendly answer I can give.
Can I take a little video of you for the gram?
Yeah, sure.
I thought that I could ask Ben, what cool recordings have you been working on recently?
Well, there's a Dope Lemon record called Golden Wolf, which will be out soon, maybe even before this podcast comes out. I'm not sure. That's been a great vibe. I've been working on that with Angus. Playing a lot of the instruments on that. And also collaborating on some of the tracks. There's a record from the Cat Empire coming up soon called Bird in Paradise. And I had the good fortune of engineering and mixing that with the guys. It's splendid. You should check it out.
What impressed you the most about the new, working on the new Cat Empire record?
I think the force of their musicality, which we all know from having seen them live. But the fact that they can sustain that level of energy take after take in the studio, utterly mind-blowing. Yeah. Cool. Do we need to say any goodbyes on the...
If you'd like to.
Oh, no, it's up to you.
Thank you, Ben, for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, man. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed diving into the world of another musician as much as I did. Help us grow by leaving a review and sharing the podcast with your friends, family, favorite artist, or anyone else who might enjoy it. For more info and updates, visit ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.